everybody. We will call this January 26th meeting of the General Policy Committee to order. And Madam Clerk, what do we have? Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Second. All right. Any discussion on that? All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We have an agenda. Thank you. That was unanimous, by the way. And minutes.
We have the approval of minutes for September 22nd, October 13th, and October 27th, 2022.
We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous as well. We have minutes. Madam Clerk.
Our next item is item number 2023-50, federal legislative priorities.
Madam Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. We have with us today Mr. Harry Glenn. Mr. Harry Glenn is from Van Stoyok and Associates. He has been the fellow lobbyist and liaison for the city for many years. He has teamed up with Tom Harrington, who is our government affairs coordinator. He has met with you all of you. He's met with Mr. Cunningham. We have included in the package a list of priorities that relate to a variety of topics: public safety, housing, transportation, utilities, economic development, reinvestment. And Mr. Glenn is in touch, of course, with mayors across the country. I think the United States Conference of Mayors was held just maybe a couple of days or so ago. He obviously is in touch with the issues around the country relative to cities and issues, many of which we obviously have in common. So he's here today, and Mr. Glenn, if you would please come forward.
Welcome, Harry.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. Thank you. It's great to be back with you again. It could be a little warmer, but thank you for having us. Congratulations to the new commissioners. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to meet with you yet. I think the next time we're here, we'll try and schedule some time to get to meet all of you. So look forward to working with you. It's been a great relationship working with the city over the last couple of years. So it's a great place. I had a son who was a Gator graduate, so I spent a lot of time here when he was a student here a couple of years ago. So it's great to be back again. I thought City Manager and Thomas asked me to kind of go through your legislative agenda, but I thought just in a lead up to going through the legislative agenda for the federal agenda for this year, it might be helpful just to hit the high points of the previous 117th Congress, because I think it helps inform some of what's on your federal agenda. So as you know, the 117th Congress passed, there were two major pieces of legislation in the 117th Congress: the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and both these pieces of legislation, by the way, will have, I think, impact on communities around the country for a number of years. So there was the bipartisan infrastructure bill that became law in 2021, initiative by the Biden administration that provides $550 billion in new spending for a whole range of infrastructure programs that will help cities and communities, transportation, energy security, climate issues, mitigation and resilience, all those sort of things that impact you every day. The great thing about this program is it provides enhanced funding for a number of existing programs, but also creates a number of new federal programs. And what's really helpful, I think, the way Congress set this program up is the money will be spread out over 5 years, 5 funding cycles. So there are 5 opportunities for all these various programs for cities and communities to apply and compete for. And so in 2022, we actually finished the first cycle for most of the programs. I think there are 1 or 2 programs that the award winners haven't been announced yet. But for the large part, you've seen stories about some of these transportation programs. Actually, the city received, it was prior to the big infusion of funds, but the city did receive, the RTS received $10 million, $10.6 million from the Federal Transit Administration for a bus and bus facilities grant to buy new electric buses to continue to upgrade your fleet. That's been a priority for your city, but also to work on the new station, the new transfer station on the east side of the city. So that was one of the largest grants in the 2022 cycle, and RTS has had a great track record of being able to deliver. So I think looking ahead to the funding that's available over the next 4 years in this enhanced infrastructure bill setting, I think the city is well positioned to work on it there. The city currently has a Safe Streets application in that's part of that. One of the new programs was creating the infrastructure bill. Probably won't hear the results of that for another couple months. And then the second major piece of legislation that Congress adopted actually last year called the Inflation Reduction Act. Did a number of things. It provided a price, helped set lower prices for prescription drugs, did some things on the tax front, but the real area that focus on for the city is the $369 billion investment in energy security, climate change, and some other programs to help our nation with its resilient mitigation. Most of these are new programs, over 30 new programs in the bill. Funding hasn't started to roll out yet. It'll probably roll out later this spring. In fact, between these two programs, there was such an increase in funding that the administration had to spend several months just staffing up to be able to manage these programs, the influx of new funds and the creation of new programs. This morning met with GRU. We had a good meeting early this morning for about an hour and a half to talk about a lot of these funding opportunities and how they'll impact GRU operations. We met with Phil Mann earlier this morning and talked about how some of these programs might help with some of your public works projects. We've had some previous conversations with Thomas about federal transit opportunities and some of the things. So the city, I think, is well positioned with your priorities really aligned with this administration on some of these programs in the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. I do want to mention that the Inflation Reduction Act does provide some special opportunities for communities too outside of the grant-making stage. What they're actually setting up, the bill sets up a series of tax credits and rebates for private sector, for homeowners, for individuals who are buying equipment and other things for their businesses. And obviously, because the city doesn't pay taxes, you wouldn't necessarily be eligible for a tax credit. So they're setting up a new operation through the Department of Treasury where communities will be eligible for rebates as you're buying heavy equipment, class 6 and 7 vehicles, as you're investing in energy security through GRU and other opportunities. If you make those investments, you're eligible to receive tax credits back from the federal government to compensate you for those costs. For instance, on the class 6 and 7 vehicles like garbage trucks, some buses, street sweepers, those kind of equipment, you can get a 30% tax credit back. So if communities are making an investment in certain things, they're already going to be buying equipment, you'll be able to get a rebate back from the Treasury. Treasury is still trying to figure out how to implement this program. It's entirely new to them. Probably be a couple more weeks before we see the details of that. But I just throw that out there as an opportunity for the city, as you're making investments, to maybe find a way to recoup some of that investment back and use it for something else. There's also a $1 billion EPA administered program, rebate. This is actually a rebate program for the purchase of certain heavy-duty equipment. And again, electric buses are a qualified expense that Treasury still has to roll out the guidance on how this is going to work, but again, a further opportunity for you all to be applying for and competing for some additional federal funds that may help you, again, move money to other parts. Treasury will be releasing information about all these programs in the coming weeks. Finally, I think the largest recipient of funds under the Inflation Reduction Act is the Environmental Protection Administration. They are trying to figure out how to roll out most of these 30 new programs. We'll continue to stay in touch with your staff about it, but much of this is focused on the environmental justice side. The administration is really focused on environmental justice. They've put out guidance to the communities. We've shared with the city a map. They've actually produced an interactive map that you can map certain sectors of your city to figure out which are considered environmentally justice sections of a community. And the reason that's important is all of these grants, one of the major competition components is, are you in an an EJ section of the community? What are your demographics on poverty and other issues, healthcare, those types of things? And so these mapping tools and data that the administration is putting out will be helpful to you in each of your departments as you're looking to apply, and we'll continue to work with Thomas on that. Finally, there's a $3 billion initiative with the Inflation Reduction Act that the city probably will compete very well for, that's focused on environmental justice programs. These are things like environmental impact, climate impact, pollution impact on local health care and quality of life. There'll be a whole series of programs that roll out related to that. Actually, the administration just last week announced the first program. It's a small $100 million program. It's divided into two components to help cities and communities plan for their environmental justice needs. Actually, one section is for planning grants and the other is for implementation grants to partner with community-based organizations to try and look at ways to improve the quality of life in those sectors of the community that are most impacted by climate change and other issues. So with that, we have spent a good amount of time with the city trying to communicate about these new programs, to share information, connect you up with webinars, to talk about all these things so your staff is aware of them. I think and the city's doing a really good job now within the departments of trying to coordinate and organize what are your priority projects and how do they match up to these federal opportunities. And then I think our goal is to work together with the city to try and figure out how to map a plan to engage with the federal government, to educate them about the city's needs and help you compete better for these projects. So we look forward to working with you. And I know it's a lot of staff time, it's a lot of grant writing and a lot of detail, but this is kind of, as we talked to the mayor about earlier today, this is kind of an unprecedented time in the federal government's history to have this amount of money available in these short windows of time. And so it's a great opportunity for the city to compete and we want to be helpful in any way we can. So with that, I just wanted to I think you have your federal agenda in front of you, and I don't want to go through all these because there's so many projects on here. I'm happy we can talk about any of them that you want to talk about, but I thought we'd highlight a few of them. This agenda is broken down into 5 sections. Talk about a couple out of each section. I think this is done in coordination with Thomas. I think has met with all of the commissioners and the mayor to talk about individual priorities, try to add those onto the list, and talk to the department heads about projects that are on there. And many of these things on your agenda are really not legislative items that are before Congress. They're more projects and priorities for the city that maybe line up with these 2 major pieces of legislation we just talked about. And under the public safety section, 2 of the areas that I know you are most interested in is the violence interruption section and section related to law enforcement technology and training. And Thomas has already been working with the Gainesville Police Department to try and figure out how to apply. There's been increased funding over the last few years for the Burn Grant Program and others within the federal government that can support some of these initiatives to acquire more technology and equipment to help the force. And this administration is really focused on violence prevention and gun violence in particular. And so there are grants going to be rolling out this year along those lines, which we'll continue to work with the city on. Second section of your legislative agenda, your federal agenda here, is economic development and reinvestment. And the first item on there, I know we have some new commissioners, not sure how familiar you are, but the first issue on there is related to the disposal of what was the former U.S. Department of Labor Job Corps site over towards the airport. Just by quick 30-second background, in 2017, when Hurricane Irma went across the city, it dropped a lot of rain and ended up flooding out the Job Corps site. And there was a neighboring site where there was some contaminated soil that washed into the Job Corps site, forcing the Job Corps program to close down in Gainesville. Initially, we had the mayor at the time was up, city manager had come up, and we met with the Department of Labor, and their plan was to clean up the facility and then reopen the Job Corps facility and continue operating. It's one of 3 in the state of Florida. Along the way, about 2 years later, the Department of Labor decided they were not going to reopen the Job Corps site. They were going to close the site permanently. The students had already been dispersed to other locations, and they were not going to come back and reopen the facility, which then created the question of what happens to that property that's owned by the Department of Labor. And so a process then began where the Department of Labor noticed the city that they were going to dispose of the property. The way that works is you go through the federal government, goes through the General Services Administration. They're technically the landlord for all the federal government, and the Department of Labor will then formally, some point later this year, turn that property over to the General Services Administration to dispose of through a process set up in public law. What that process entails is that before they could dispose of the property, they had to go through a whole series of environmental reviews and analyze what's on the property, make sure everything's been cleaned up, that there's not any environmental risk to the future owner of the property. And then they began a process that's set up through a pecking order of who gets first priority to get the property back. Right now, under the law, the first priority goes to any other federal agency that may want the property. They can transfer the property to that agency. If a federal government declines the property, by law, the next part of the pecking order is the homeless programs. Homeless initiatives, homeless providers get priority to access the property, and so that's the second stop in the process. If no homeless entity expresses an interest in the property, then the next conveyor, the recipient of the property, could be state and local government, which is where you would fall in. So That, and we could talk, I think we talked to the mayor earlier today. I think the mayor is going to schedule a separate session maybe to talk about this in more detail. But part of the public conveyance process is that the state or the local governments would have to use it in very specific ways. And there has been some interest from the city exploring the idea of using that facility for future police and fire training, emergency training operations, which is an eligible use of the property. In that case, if the city expresses an interest in that, the previous mayor has already sent a letter to the agencies asking for their review of the planned use for the project, potential use of the project, and they'll ultimately give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether it's an eligible use. If it is an eligible use, then GSA can transfer the property to the state, the city, or the county, or any other public institution within the state at no cost to the city. But the city then has to maintain that property and use that property in the same way that they requested it into perpetuity. So it's a long-term commitment on the part of the city. If the city, county, or state does not express an interest in the property, no other governmental agency looks at it, then the GSA would then put this property up for sale to the private sector at fair market value or higher. Multiple bidders, then they can bid the property up, but they can't dispose of the property for less than fair market value. So that said, the city manager has been on a number of calls with General Service Administration to talk through this process. We've been out to the site a couple of times to tour the site and look at the facilities, talk through the process with GSA. They were hoping, frankly, to start the process and list the property through the Federal Register sometime this month, but the process has been delayed by the Department of Labor because they're still gathering information on some of the status of the soil and other issues related to the property. So it looks like now that GSA says that at the earliest they won't be able to surplus this property until sometime in the spring, more likely April, potentially even May, and so that gives more time for the city to look at it. I think the mayor would like to have a more full-scale discussion about options at a later time. So that's just sort of a summary of the situation we're working on. And your folks have been really good about staying in touch with GSA about all the options. A couple other items in the economic development side of the list, other than GSA, was the East Side Health and Economic Development Initiative, the EHEDI project. We've talked to Mr. Mann and some other folks within the city. This is obviously a great project and a high priority for the city. And we believe from the federal side that there may be some good federal opportunities for partnership on various aspects of this project. You've already received federal funding for the transfer station, the RTS transfer station there. And I know you've already dedicated some of your ARPA funding, your COVID-related funding to the project. But there may be some other opportunities there through programs like the Economic Development Initiative, some of the health and human services programs to accelerate or provide additional resources to that project. And we look forward to working with the city to help you identify some of those. And then finally, Thomas asked me to mention the opportunity zones because several times before when I've been here before the commission, people have asked questions about the opportunity zone program. As you know, this was a program initiated a number of years ago to partner the private sector investment with communities to provide tax incentives to develop sectors of underserved sections of the community. Governors were allowed to nominate sections of communities that were considered opportunity zones, and then they qualify for certain tax breaks for developers coming in. The city at one point was interested in some of these programs, and fortunately I think the opportunity zone program kind of languished over the last few years. There's been not a lot of discussion. Some of the deadlines have already passed. There was some conversation about reopening the program and extending some deadlines, and at this point we've heard nothing new. We're in a brand new Congress. Legislation is just being introduced, and we'll continue to stay in touch with the city in case anything does develop on that. Under the transportation front section of your agenda, we talked briefly about RTS. They have done a fantastic job over the years of competing for federal funds for a whole variety of things, including your facilities and your electric bus fleet. And with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there are enormous opportunities for RTS to continue to compete for those funds. There have been enhanced, almost double the amount of federal money available for transit programs, and so I'm sure they will continue to be successful on that front, and happy to help in any way that we can. Under the housing section, we talked to the mayor a little bit about affordable housing. There isn't a huge pot of money on the federal side for investment in affordable housing. There are some tax incentives and other programs that Congress is looking at. One significant tax break for a tax credit for affordable housing actually expired during the last year, and Congress is looking to extend that. That provides incentives to developers of affordable housing. There was an announcement last week that the U.S. Treasury put back out for counties across the country and $690 million from the COVID relief money that was made available in 2021 to help with renters who are fallen behind in their rental payments. That money at Alachua County will be eligible for some of those additional funds that are coming out. Hopefully that helps the city. We talked to the mayor briefly today about homeless assistance. There is an increase in funding in the 2023 budget for homeless assistance programs. We're happy to help. I know that the GRACE program has been a great program here, and capacity continues to grow, so we're happy to work with you on that. And then finally, under the utilities section of the bill, we spent quite a bit of time this morning with the GRU talking about some of their initiatives and how they line up with some of the federal funding opportunities under both of these big programs. Sustainable infrastructure, sustainability of the utilities themselves is a huge area that both bills invest in. Electric vehicle charging is another area that the administration has made an investment through Congress. Smart grid and cybersecurity, particularly for utilities, hugely important. And last year we had a meeting on the biomass facility with local Congressman Kamek about some tax incentive or some regulatory opportunities there that could actually provide some additional revenue towards GRU related to cogeneration of electricity that's used to charge electric vehicles. Finally, Congress is, in the last Congress and again this year, is really focused on an issue called PFAS. I can never pronounce it, the polyfluoroglycol substances. These are substances that are found in many products, most notably in foam used by firefighters to suppress fires. There's a chemical in there that gets into the water supply and has been known to cause cancer. Congress has taken a real bipartisan initiative over the last 3 years to try and create new regulations to prevent the use of PFAS, to monitor the movement of PFAS into the water supply, and to develop alternative sources of the uses for PFAS, trying to find alternate chemicals that aren't cancer-causing agents. They're already transitioning to new firefighting foams. The reason I raise that is that it does have an impact on GRU. All water utilities are concerned about this because of the potential long-term liability they may have for cleaning up some of these substances that get into the water supply through no fault of their own. So we'll continue to share with the GRU team anything that happens on PFAS, because like I said, is a significant interest to the industry. With that, I'm sorry to ramble through that so fast, so you have a large agenda. I think it might be helpful just to take questions and try and provide any additional information that you all have.
Commissioner Chestnut, then Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I think it was late fall that there was an announcement that there would be funds available to help people with their utility bills, their winter utility bills. I think the Vice President was going to have a strong hand in managing that. Could you share some information on that? Is it too late for us to access funds there?
Right.
Are they going to be able to help anyone this winter with their bills?
Right, so there are two programs. One that I think you're talking about specifically is the Low-Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program, LAHEAP they call it. It's a program that helps both heating and air conditioning, which is important in Florida, for low-income families that have difficulty paying their bills. That program is actually, the funds are distributed by formula to nonprofit organizations within communities who then distribute the money. I think, Thomas, it's called the Coalition.
Central Florida Action Agency.
Central Florida Action Agency is your local recipient of those funds, comes through on a formula. They did enhance the amount of money that's available to the LAHEAP program, so the allocation they'll receive will go up this year, but it's through the coalition distributes the funds. I think GRU.
Okay, does Thomas know if we have received those funds?
So,
You know.
yes, I'll address, so we don't receive the funds,
No,
they
he
go to
said
the
the-
agencies.
he said the agency.
We're working with Community Action Agency, we partnered with them last year and we're partnering with them again. We're going to have another like event with them. Like last year we had GRU, they came to GRU, took applications, and then filled out those applications, and they distributed the funds directly to customers. We're going to do that again coming up. And Thomas, are you a vet? I don't know if we have a schedule for that
What
yet.
I'm trying to find out is, have we received any funds under that grant application, under that grant?
So we have not, but
Not-
the Community Action Agency
I mean,
has.
the city, I mean, Community Action Agency.
Yes.
Thomas,
Go ahead.
do you know if they have, if their funds have been enhanced?
So when I spoke with them, you want me to come up to
Ms. Carter, why don't you come up too, if you would?
So when I had my last conversation with staff over there about a month and a half ago, at that juncture, they had indicated there'd be significant lag time till they actually see the increased funding that the vice president had announced, a month or so earlier before that. So nothing to my attention has come up
Okay.
since.
All right, well, would you keep an eye on that, and when they receive the funds, if there could be some major announcement to the community of the availability of the funds?
Certainly, and I could work with GRU on that too.
And I think Yvette has probably a little bit.
Okay, oh, she has
Closer.
something on it.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. As you know, that's an ongoing funding. The increased funding is something new, and we can work with their COO, Ms. Seawright, to ensure that something comes out soon. But they will be doing our special visit to GRU. We're doing it at MLK's because it's a bigger location. Those folks will not have to stand out in the sun and all of that. It was originally slated late February, but because of all of the things that are going on, they want to do it a little later in the spring, but it'll be before the summer.
Okay, and
So-
so there the cooling comes in.
I'm s-
The cooling component of the funds come in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner, just as a side note, talked to the mayor about this today too. There is the Inflation Reduction Act also makes an investment in weatherization programs for low-income homeowners. And so we're going to talk to the mayor about, we'll track that and make sure when that becomes available, we'll let the city know. The city can apply in partnership with other organizations to help with the weatherization program. That would provide grants to help replace appliances and other equipment that's out of date, provide more energy efficient equipment, and also help weatherize the homes to reduce the energy draw. So we'll make sure you're aware of that, but it is a
Please.
significant new federal investment in the program too.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Conclude.
I conclude.
Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll bounce off that one first. So, Mr. Cunningham, I think last time Community Action Agency came in, there were some concerns that it was all in English, and that a good chunk of our community and GRU's base was left out of that conversation. So if they're coming back, and now according to Ms. Carter, it's going to be even later, so they have time to make sure it's in all the languages we've been logging as necessary through our interpretation line of GRU. I greatly appreciate that, because last time there was a bit of an outcry.
Okay. We will work with them.
Thank you. So my question is more about LIHTC.
I'm sorry?
LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit.
Okay?
So I'm completely for saying that we should reauthorize it. It's a personal preference that in addition to the reauthorization of it, that we look for stronger consequences to early exits, because that's been the downfall of a lot of LIHTC properties, that people just buy out at 15 because it's financially viable, and then they don't continue for the 30-year plan. That's the purpose of LIHTC. So that's just a personal preference to add to the list as far as the priority, if no one argues. And for those who don't know, it's so LIHTC, in theory, you get like tax credits back for 30 years of the life of the building. A lot of developers would just buy out early at 15 and then make the property market rate after a minimum number of years. So the whole purpose of having at least a couple decades worth of affordable property gets defeated, and they still make profit. So that would just be my request, to increase consequences as a result, and I think that would make the program stronger.
And this is a good time for that conversation to be had, because Congress will have to look at a list of all expiring tax credits, this being one. Actually, Congress actually doubled the tax credit during the last Congress for low-income housing, and so we'll make sure that you share the city's views on that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Owens.
I think I have three questions. The first is about the HERA, high energy High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act. It was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. My rough understanding is that the law laid out that there was an option of whether the states or utilities were directly going to be involved in those rebates, and this is to customers. And I didn't know whether there had been any more action from the federal government about that decision making. I understand that Florida would have to make those decisions, whether those decisions have made, or there's more action from the government to guide so that we can be more prepared. If it's a utility, then we're clearly like, it's going to be a big chunk of new work. But if it's even the state, how we interact with the state so we can, as many of our customers can get it, because it's substantial, up to like $14,000. It's very substantial, and it's not even just the lowest end, kind of middle income as well. So has there been any more on that?
So that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Department of Treasury it's kind of like when Congress passed the ARPA funding during the COVID period. The Department of Treasury was tasked with having to write the regulations on how to implement the program. It took several months to get out and several revisions along the way. Same thing's happening with the Inflation Reduction Act. Treasury, because it's a rebate program, is actually having to issue regulations on how the program's going to operate. If I recall the program correctly, the cities cannot be direct applicants for the funds, but I think the funds go through the state and they can be a sub-applicant to receive the funds. They can help, in other words, help homeowners qualify for the rebates. But I think all the requirements of how the program's going to operate will be in the income levels and everything else that can be laid out in the regulations. Expect to see them sometime in March is what they're saying. I believe it maybe April, fall April, but as soon as we see that, we will let you know, Commissioner, and share it with the GRU. And if, just as a side note to that, I don't mean to backtrack on, when I was talking earlier about particularly the Inflation Reduction Act, but in some cases the infrastructure bill, quite a bit of the federal money actually passes directly to the state, and the states are administering many of these programs. So in some cases, while the federal government provides general guidance for how to use the funds, the state actually has to set up their own program. We talked to GRU today about that. I mean, some of the water revolving funds that are enhanced funding from the federal government, but the state has to implement the program. So that's the case in that. There's cybersecurity programs, same thing, some of the highway programs. So a lot of this is the federal government provides guidance, and then the state provides their own guidance. So it's kind of like two levels of guidance that you have to receive. As soon as we see that, we'll be sure to let you know.
Okay. The one was, in one of the omnibus funding bills, there was money set aside to support local government through zoning reform. That grant process.
Again, that one's with, I believe it's with EPA. When you say, I think there's zoning, but also code and development of new housing codes too. I think the whole idea there was to incentivize communities to develop stricter codes to enhance energy efficiency and resilient construction in places like Florida. So again, another program that hasn't been implemented yet, still regulated, the program's still being written. We'll share that with you as soon as we see it.
Okay, my question was specific about zoning reform.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
Not the code portion.
I was more familiar with the code enhancement than I was with zoning, but
because our previous commission did pass some zoning reform, it is definitely an issue of importance to understand what that process will be. Like you said, some of it may not be laid out yet by the government, but this body will be making decisions about a previous amendment or a previous ordinance. And my understanding is there were, $80–90 million set aside for local governments who make these zoning reforms. So it is a very, very, very timely discussion, literally in the next few weeks. And the third question was, and this is maybe a question maybe for general government, is with the surplus federal property, if it goes to private sale, do we zone or land use before it goes for sale, or is that post-sale?
I think it would be post-sale, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Forrest, did you hear the question?
At the beginning of the question.
Just if that land, that surplus federal land goes to sale, private sale, do we have the opportunity to change zoning or land use before sale so that the buyer knows what they're getting, or is that a post-sale thing?
Typically, it would be post-sale. It would be dependent on the project and the goals, but it would be post-sale because those rights that you're giving of course, affect the value.
Okay, thank you.
Just. You finished, Commissioner Willetts?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner
Just asking more broadly, what advice are you giving to cities like ours to make sure that we're as competitive as we possibly can be for these grants, like making sure we have set-asides money for grant matching, making sure we have projects set up, just spending staff time for grants? I mean, what is your general recommendation for
So a couple things. First, I think many of the city communities we visit with, they say, how do we access the money? And where's the money? We want to go get the money. And I think we try to advise communities to, let's look at the list, let's look at your city priorities, your projects on your list, and what are your priorities, and try and match those to the funding initiatives. I think some communities just see the large pot of money and they want to go get it without having a project. So I think the first thing is, and like I said, we talked to Jerry, we talked to Mr. Mann today about that, and they have a good plan on that. So I think look at your list and figure out how to access take your list and match it to the programs. That's what we're trying to help you all do. So I think the first thing there. Second thing is, I think to make sure that if you're pursuing some of these grant opportunities, make sure you have everything in line first. In other words, as you mentioned, if there's a match required, applications are much stronger if you have the match already identified than if you try to apply for something and say, we'll find the match later if we win. Mm-hmm. Same thing with land. Sometimes you need to secure land for a transportation project or something else. And applications that say, well, we'll secure the property once we get the application, again, not as competitive. Third thing is show broad community support for what you're applying for. They really want to see the communities invested in the projects you're looking at. So the fact that the commission says this is a priority for us, they also want to see that the Chamber of Commerce, other organizations in the community are supportive of the project. Next thing I would say is this administration is very focused. I talked earlier about environmental justice and some of the criteria that they laid out. Really make sure that the projects address all of those areas. If it's if you have a project that's in what's mapped as an environmental justice area, that you will compete much better than if you're not. Make sure that you answer all the data on what's the economic data within the particular area where the project will be built, all that. So make sure you have a very strong application on. They like to see a lot of data in this administration. And then lastly, I think we talked to GRU, we talked to the mayor. Be a little more active politically. Go and tell your story about the city of Gainesville to the administration, the people who are the political types in the administration are going to be making these decisions about the projects, and make sure they understand Gainesville, the nature of Gainesville, and why this is a priority project for the city. Make sure that you don't just rely on your written application to tell your story. Make sure you go up and actually talk to people face to face and explain. Because what happens typically in these programs is there's a technical review of the applications, and so the staff of the agency, whichever agency you're applying to, will go through and review the applications technically. They'll look at, does this project qualify for this pot of funding, yes or no? I mean, people apply all the time for projects that they don't qualify for, so they remove those projects from the pot. And for other reasons, sometimes they'll see things that don't line up with the program and take them out. After that, and then the projects are scored by the technical staff, so you'll get an ABCD number score, and then they go to the political side of the agency, and the political folks actually make the final decisions. And as we were talking to some of your staff and the mayor about today, we've seen projects that were scored high didn't get funded, and lower scored projects actually got funded. And there's a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes it's regional distribution of the funds. I mean, the funds have to be spread across the country, so sometimes you're competing with projects in your own state more than you are across the country. But also, I mean, just philosophically, sometimes the project appeals to the political folks that are making the final decisions. And so our advice is to engage politically as best you can and go up and talk to the decision makers about the project and why it's important to you.
One of the things that came up, I think it was the infrastructure bill, was a lot of money for broadband expansion. We have a group, COM, here. We spent many years researching the best ways to use our many hundreds of miles of fiber that we have to bring in more revenue and just expand out high-speed, affordable broadband internet to more people. Where are we in terms of the process of that playing out, and are there any opportunities for our city to take advantage of that?
Yeah, so the broadband money was laid out into well, there are several programs, 2 pots of money for the broadband development. One pot of money goes to the state, and the state will decide how to use some of that and work with the communities on that. Then there's a second pot of money where communities can directly apply for the funds. And we've talked to GRU about this extensively. And I think it's up to how you want to pursue that. I mean, there are funds available to connect public facilities to the broadband. In other words, rather than direct home connection, but to connect schools, libraries, other civic centers, other public entities to the broadband where they're not connected. So there's a program for that. There is a program to roll out to communities. But I think the city did a survey when I was at a previous meeting where you kind of looked at all that and found out you had pretty good coverage, I think, when it came to the broadband to the homeowners. It seemed like it was not as high a priority. And then there are programs that Congress created to help with affordability of broadband services, that individuals could apply for a rebate or a reduction in the cost that they're paying for their broadband services, that based on your income you're eligible for. And those are applied through the provider of the broadband service. So, I mean, I think there are opportunities out there. I think some communities have found it more difficult than they first thought to take on a broadband program. And so I think there's been that. The other issues, I think much of the broadband funding was targeted to rural communities where they had no access to broadband, and to low-income communities. And so some communities have had difficulty competing for the funds just because of the income requirements.
And then I noticed on the transportation, not as much in here, pull it up, on actual like street infrastructure, things like that. Why would that not necessarily be in here? What is the process for getting funds in locally for just typical street infrastructure?
So there are several different programs and some new programs. One of the new programs was created, called Safe Streets for All program, which is to enhance safety, vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle safety on streets. You do have an application pending for that right now with the Department of Transportation. So there is that. I mean, the federal government is not funding maintenance of roadways, in other words, resurfacing and all of that. What they're looking to fund are safety programs, looking to fund programs where you enhance resilience. We have, in Florida particularly, a problem with flooding of roadways. Even in non-storm times, you get flooding of roadways, so they're looking to do things to help with the resilience of that. So, I mean, there are a variety of programs. We're happy to work. I think we've talked to your staff about some of the priorities that you have to improve safety and to increase capacity. So and there are a variety of, I mean, there's the RAISE grant program, which covers just about every transportation need that you can think of. Very highly competitive program, but some Florida communities have been successful at doing roadway projects on that. There is Congress created a new program, discretionary bridge program, to allow communities to invest in bridges. Florida, unfortunately, is not competing very well. There's a state allotment of money for that, and then there's a local allotment of money for that. Florida didn't compete very well for that because, frankly, the Florida bridges have been in pretty good shape, and they've done a good job at monitoring them to make sure they don't fall out of compliance. And so other states that were less dutiful, I think, have gotten a higher percentage of the funding. So there are a variety of programs, and if there's particular street projects, we're happy to work with your staff about that.
Thank you. I think this is incredibly important. As you mentioned, very rarely do local governments or just government in general have access to the kinds of investments that they're getting in there. So I would very much in favor for general government, for GRU to really make time and space in our budget for grant matching where that's possible, use staff time. I would hate for this opportunity to pass us by without really utilizing and leveraging as much federal money as we can with us. So thank you.
Commissioner
Yes,
Chastain.
and to follow up on that point, do we have anyone on staff who's responsible for grant writing following either GRU or general government?
We have on the general government side our grant accountant, and we have a position that we are recruiting for that was in the budget office, but we've just moved it to the finance department to support them on our grants coordination. So we have 2 positions, one field, one we're recruiting for. And of course, Thomas Harrington also is always in contact with
I have found the school board has a person, and that's all they do. They're dedicated to grant writing, and the school board's been very successful in getting lots of federal grants. So I think it's really important that we have someone who's keyed in on it, was looking at the Federal Register every week, or whatever, every day, but keyed in to make sure that we maximize the grant opportunities.
We have someone like that situated in our RTS department as well.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And I say at GRU, so we've assembled sort of like a grant team. So we have folks in our Office of Sustainability that are really out looking for those opportunities and grants. We have folks within our Budget Finance and Accounting that are really organizing and centralizing. We've actually written a grants manual sort of for a process which we haven't had in the past. It's been more ad hoc in the past. And then we've had structure both through Harry Glenn and through other partners that are helping us look at each of those opportunities and evaluating them. So we have gotten grants recently. We've applied for several grants recently, and then we're kind of watching as these come down. And I think what's happening, and Harry really talked about it this morning, reinforced this morning, is a lot of, the money kind of came in, but the structure and the systems weren't there to process them. And some of the money they pushed to the states, you talk to the state and they're still trying to figure that out. And so we're staying on top of that. Ryan Matthews, Harry are staying on top of it at the state and the federal level so that we're kind of getting ready and be in line for that availability. And we're really trying to tie it, like Mr. Glenn mentioned, tie it to things we're doing so that we have those types of things we're doing. We have those funds budgeted to do. This is just a way to reduce the cost of doing those things. And that looks like there's going to be opportunities. We're pursuing those. We have 2 grants out right now that we're waiting for feedback on. So I think all of that's good news. The other thing I will say is just at the joint city-county meeting the other day, there was a grant from the state, which is through the Water Management District for the wetlands project, which was $1 million for the property and probably $4 to $5 million for the design and construction. So it's significant grants that we have achieved as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Bowe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So two brief comments and then just one question. Santa Fe College also has grant specialists, and then they work with the independent division to really make sure that they're hitting all the buzzwords and all the key aspects of that grant, just like you mentioned in some of the applications. So that is important. So good to hear that you're assembling a team. It's a very good question about essentially making sure we're putting our best foot forward and being very competitive, Commissioner Eastman, because some of the details that you provided for us make sure that we align our grant with what are those key aspects. And sometimes what I've found is merely getting on the phone, if you can penetrate the phone network to get to maybe who's reviewing following the technical review, speaking to someone in that personal contact really is essential for maybe some extra attention given to the application. So very important, get someone on the phone in the back end. Lastly, I just think this is a question probably not for you, Mr. Gunn, but maybe you, Mr. Mayor, or Madam Manager, just on this one particular item, the University Avenue Public Safety. Can you remind me, since we had that one kind of moving forward, is what were our boundaries for that particular grant application?
It's basically Lofton High School to West 34th Street.
And just University Avenue, did it go out or take any of the collateral Southwest 2nd Avenue corridor?
No, but 13th Street is part of the redesign as well, from the DNA Bridge to the 8th Avenue Bridge.
Lofton to 34th Street, and what was the other one, Mr. Mayor?
The DNA Bridge to the 8th Avenue Bridge.
Thank you, helpful.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, can I comment one thing?
Yeah, please.
Commissioner, to your comment about the application itself, one of the things we try to be helpful to, everybody wants to win when they apply, everybody wants to win, nobody wants to lose, but sometimes you don't succeed the first time. What we advise our clients, you asked earlier about how we advise to be successful, particularly with the infrastructure bill where there's 5 years of funding, large amounts of funding over 5 years. We work with clients who weren't successful the first time, but one of the things we do with our clients is make sure we schedule a debrief with the agency that reviewed the proposal to get their guidance, and we found that guidance to be hugely helpful because then they can revise the application and resubmit the next go-around, and we find that they're successful oftentimes in the second go-around. So as the staff writes these proposals and may not be successful the first time, don't give up. You've already invested the work and the time and the energy in the application. Take the credit, just like a professor would tell you in college or in high school, listen to what they tell you and incorporate that in, and you'll be successful. And so that's one of our goals, is to make sure that every time you apply and don't succeed, we get you that debrief.
So, thank you, Harry, and thank you, commissioners, for your input there. I will tell you that from the reaching out that the administration has done for me, they clearly want Gainesville to be successful in these things. So there are very obvious reasons that they want Gainesville to be successful. They want to be able to use our success to tell their story of success. I think a place where we have where we haven't done as well as we could over the last few years is not so much not seeing where the grant is and seeing where the program is, but not really establishing our story, our larger story. And that's not just a question of telling a story about a specific program, but the Gainesville story, and making sure that story is told very well through Tallahassee and through DC, as well as through our own community. And it really is all connected. You know, if folks at the agencies in DC are used to seeing the word Gainesville and reading our programs and knowing people, we will be more successful in winning those. The same is true in Tallahassee, although we have some other stones in the pathway there. But in general, though, once we start this process moving of everybody being comfortable and familiar with Gainesville, we will win more opportunities. And even if we miss a particular grant application, we might get the next one because they're familiar with us, because they're used to seeing us. It's like any other kind of communication. And that really, that telling the Gainesville story, I think is more critical than we could possibly imagine. And it's hard to do when we have a revolving door at management. We don't have that anymore. I mean, we are in a position to really set the stage to be very, very successful. And Lauren used to like to talk about old man Poe stories. Well, here's an old man Ward story. We, prior to this administration, prior to last year, late 21, early 22, we just didn't have these opportunities. I mean, serving back to 2017, these weren't conversations. When we had these conversations, the list was shorter and the opportunities were a lot shorter. And we need to recognize that this is a window of opportunity that is unprecedented. And our opportunity to tell that story and make sure we take advantage of these things is now. It's over the next, probably year, I think that we have to strike, because the iron is hot. And I can't stress that enough. So, Madam Manager, Mr. General Manager, do you think we need, I don't think we necessarily need a motion here, but we are.
This is an update.
Yeah, this is an update where we're familiar with the opportunities here, and I would encourage commissioners, everybody to have Mr. Glenn on speed dial, have Thomas regular meetings, and make sure that we are all understanding the assignment, as it were. So, all right. Harry, anything else you want to add?
No, you said it well. I would look forward to working with you and your staff to make sure we're positioning Gainesville for success, and I think they're great opportunities. It is a unique time in history, so look forward to working with you. And if I promise some information, we'll get that back to you. And if anybody has questions, I can give you my contact information, or Thomas has it. Please reach out, and we'll get you whatever information you need.
Very good. All right, Commissioner Eastman, did you have anything?
Oh, well, you just mentioned meeting with people in person. You mentioned telling your story. Would it be worth it to schedule a time over the next year to send people up to DC, have commissioners go, and really start to tell our story? Right?
Yep.
That's something we should start thinking about now.
Okay. Well, let's just make sure we're really prepped with everything we could have. And I talked with Mr. Glenn earlier today. It makes sense to bring not only staff, but also community advocates as part of it when a commissioner goes, so there's a real story to tell and a difficult thing to say no to. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Our next item is item number 2023-10, community-based organization funding process. With the recommendation that the General Policy Committee hear a presentation from staff and discuss.
the clerk's office is
Okay.
presenting this.
Okay, all right.
Yes, hi, Mayor and Commissioners, Morgan Spicer, Interim Policy Oversight Administrator. I am joined today by one of our policy fellows, Austin Burton, and Austin is going to be sharing the research that was done into processes and programs that other municipalities use to fund their community-based organizations and nonprofits. Before I hand it over to Austin, quickly just a reminder of our policy process. Phase 1 was research and idea formulation, which resulted in our report, and we are currently in Phase 2. And I will hand it over to Austin. Thank you.
All right, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to y'all. So the current process right now is that there's essentially no existing process. Currently, organizations essentially come to general commission meetings, city commission meetings, and present in a manner for general funding requests. However, we do recognize that the city does offer specific funding areas that do have individual competitive processes and programs such as the cultural arts programs, community development block grants, the home programs, and others. The total of all of those and the additional programs are that 613,000 number. So, however, the reason for this research is because of that ad hoc request process in order to give this a little bit more of a general, more constructive approach to this. So these are the case studies that we looked into through the research process, beginning with the Choices program through Alachua County. The Choices program was created through a 25-cent tax levy program in 2004. Through this program, the main focus is to assist uninsured residents in community health needs regarding medical services, oral and dental health, and behavioral health. And during the 2020 to 2022 cycle, 8 different agencies running 10 unique programs were supported by the $465,000 in annual funding. Each funding cycle is a 3-year duration of funds beginning at the start of the fiscal year on October 1st and going through September 30th, with the most recent funding timeline running from October 1st of 2022 to September 30th of 2024. The most recent application deadline occurred on May 31st of 2022. And the process goes, the applications then enter a review process that is conducted by a Citizens Grant Review Committee during the months of June and July, with the final decisions being made in September by the Board of County Commissioners. The second program we looked at was the CAP program, also administered by Alachua County. The current priorities of the CAP program are child education, child safety, disabilities and health maintenance, homelessness and housing, hunger relief, and senior care. And in fiscal year 2022, the CAP program had $1,421,193 in funds that supported 29 different community organizations and 40 unique programs. Similar to Choices, the funds are allocated over the course of a 3-year funding cycle, again beginning at the beginning of the fiscal year of October 1st and ending years later at the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. During the most recent application timeline, applications opened on March 31st of 2021 and closed on May 4th of 2021. Similar process again for the review. A Citizens Grant Review Committee reviews the applications from May to June, with the county commissioners having final approval power. Moving to Miami-Dade County with the Community-Based Organization Grant Program. This grant program supports 125 organizations in the focus areas of children and adults with disabilities, children, youth, and family services, criminal justice, elder assistance, healthcare, immigrants and new entrants, workforce development for special populations, mental health, homelessness, and domestic violence and sexual assault victim services. And so funding for this program has been spotty throughout the time that it has been offered, with annual funding ranging from $13 million to $25 million. And the most recent official process with full application period occurred in 2017, with the annual funding being $14 million. So essentially what has happened now, up to this date, is that with available funding, organizations that were accepted in 2017 have essentially rolled over. And so during the process in 2017, the RFP was released in February. Applications were due in April, with an evaluation from an advisory board running from June to August, with the Board of County Commissioners approving contracts in October at the start of the fiscal year, with contracts then beginning in February. Since 2017, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, existing contracts have been extended. However, what Morgan and I found was that currently the Office of Management and Budget is seeking community input to essentially restart the program, enhance it, get that community focus back into it. With the City of Pompano Beach, they have the Community Partnerships Grant Program with the focus areas of work readiness, education, senior assistance, and community events. And with that $300,000 in annual funding for fiscal year 23, 25 organizations will be supported, with each applicant being awarded between $5,000 to $15,000. The funding lasts for 1 fiscal year, and the application process is open for 1 month, with this most recent cycle occurring from April 4th to May 6th. Awarded recipients are then selected in July, with funding beginning in October on a quarterly waived basis. A special note for this program, it is the only one out of the case studies that we looked into where the city allocated management over essentially the review and then making the recommendations to the city to essentially a contracted agency. It wasn't done through a volunteer advisory board or anything. And then finally, with the City of Orlando's Community Investment Grant Program, the focus areas for this program are in housing services for the homeless, family sustainability, domestic violence, support for seniors, and improving access of healthy foods. And in fiscal year 23, the program has an annual funding allotment of $2.4 million, which is expected to increase due to continued investment and interest in the program. I know after this presentation was made, I actually looked again on the website, and this next fiscal year is $2.5 million. Applicants can be submitted at any point of the year, but specifically for this most recent application, they were due on March 25th in order to be considered for that cycle. But again, like if another organization wanted to apply, they can essentially do that at any point in the year. Applications are then reviewed by an advisory board made of past grant recipients, academics, industry, and community experts between April and May. And then recommendations are then passed on to the city budget office in June. And then over the course of the summer, while funding recommendations are being made for the city budget, the grant recommendations are then included in those budget discussions. And then between September and October, those recommendations are then passed on to the city council for approval, with contracts created in January. And so closing out, the potential advantages to this policy are not limited just to these 3, but to highlight a few. A potential for this policy would be creating a streamlined competitive process for community organizations to apply for and receive funding, which may result in a more equitable distribution of funds. It may reduce the number of requests for funding by organizations throughout the fiscal year. And then finally, awarding city grants to organizations could increase a sense of credibility for the specific organization among the community, which could then increase their reach for future opportunities. Potential disadvantages to this policy: some organizations may not be aware of the opportunity for funding, especially if we were to possibly transition to a more official review process, and they may miss important deadlines. Organizations that do not fall under possible focus areas that the city might want to prioritize, they could miss out on important funding. And then finally, a more rigorous process could create barriers for newer nonprofits, as well as organizations who may be unfamiliar with grant writing proposals compared to the option that they now have of just presenting to the city commission. And so areas of further consideration that we can look into: what focus areas would the city of Gainesville like to look into? How much money would we like to invest in this grant program, as well as would existing city grant programs such as those with GCRA or PRCA, along with the other ones that we mentioned earlier in this, would those be combined into this general funding program, or would they still remain separate? How long should this funding cycle be? Should selected organizations be restricted in accessing other city grant programs? I know that was a highlight of a few of them that we looked into. And then can organizations be awarded funds in consecutive funding cycles?
Yeah,
Thank you, Austin. Just to close up quickly, just a reminder of the remaining steps of the policy process. If you all choose to move forward with this item, Phase 3 is timeline and resource development. Phase 4 is full staff analysis and proposal development. Phase 5, the proposal would return to GPC, and then Phase 6 would be implementation if that's the will of the commission. But that's what we have for you all today. Thank you very much, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Excellent presentation and very thorough work. I appreciate you. Commissioner Sacco was up first, and then Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Thank you, Austin. This was great. I have a question. If you don't know the answer, it's okay. Management might know the answer. Do you know how many nonprofit organizations across the city organization I see Morgan shaking her head, that we partner with, that we fund in some way or another, either, $5,000 grants or $1 million grants?
Well, no, we do not. Okay. So
Probably a huge number.
I have some information.
Okay.
So between HCD, Housing and Community Development, Park, Recreation, Cultural Affairs, and GCRA, there are a total of approximately 111. We have 111 mentioned. 22 for HCD, 22 for Park, Recreation, Cultural Affairs, 67 for GCRA, for a total of 111. Dollar value in terms of those agencies funded, of the 22 in HCD, which would primarily be CDBG home, 551,000 in Park, Recreation, Cultural Affairs for the 22 agencies that are funded there, 177,000, and in GCRA, the 67 agencies served, 5.8 million, for a total of the 111 total across all those, 6.5 million. So that doesn't include the 32 agencies that we funded through ARPA. So if we add the 6.9 of ARPA onto the 6.5, the city of Gainesville actually is putting out $13.4 million to organizations across the city. And if I add the 32 to that, that's over 140 different agencies in the city that's getting it. So the comment beyond that is, there are processes around HCD and how they distribute their money. There's a process around PRCA, and there's a process around GCRA. The concern, obviously, is when we have the processes and folk come directly to the commission, organizations, as happened when we were dealing with ARPA, and they avoid going through a process. It's not fair to the other agencies that have adhered to the processes of these different entities. And so that's kind of why we are here today.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Manager. And that's just through HCD, GCRA, and PRCA?
The 6.5, the 111,
yeah.
yes.
And then ARPA's a whole separate thing, which it's an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
So
and there was a process around ARPA, as you
There
know.
was, yeah. I'm trying to think, and I would imagine that GRU has some, and I'm thinking of like weatherization. So I'm thinking, we partner with so many nonprofits on any given topic. And Austin, you listed quite a few topics that every municipality puts, that I don't disagree we need a process. I don't disagree with that. What I wonder is what categories, I think for lack of a better term, what categories of nonprofit we would be assisting that would not already be covered by these. And they seem to be more, I'd say, like social justice, and I would assume they're more social justice, food-based. That's still a social justice issue. I'm blanking under social justice as the one we're not covering here that we would regularly fund and assist, or get involved with, I should say. And I don't mind having a process if it's for that, if it's for a broad. I guess I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around which categories outside of a broad general term, because I'm thinking of all the ones that have come before us in just the 3 years I've been here, and oh God, it's been a while. Okay, like 2 years, 2.5? I don't know anymore. And then years prior to that when even I was saying, bringing forward projects. So I guess beyond building that category, and that's an initial step that we need to even project how much money or funding sources we'd look for, that's the step I get stuck on, to which categories, and that's why I kind of wanted staff's input on where are we helping? Where have we, outside of those, given funds? Because I know that there are groups outside of this that we've given funds to, and I think those would be the ones I'd need to see data on, that outside of these programs, where have we given funding to nonprofits across both boards, GRU and general government, to see if there is any, what's the word, like continuity across the categories of the nonprofit types, to see if there is any theme that we could build categories upon and say, when it's these types of organizations, we can use this kind of project because for housing, redevelopment, and arts and recreation, we have a program, we have a fund, and we have a system. So I think at this point, and I had to think that out loud, sorry guys. I think at this point what I would need is through management to see what those outlying nonprofits we have funded are. And Austin, you can just go back and do more research.
There you go.
Fun. Just to see what those nonprofits and programming opportunities or partnerships we've taken up, what those categories of nonprofits would describe themselves as or the programming as, and to what amount. Because I think that's the one that we're ultimately going to be looking at, is what's outside of these normal programs that are already budgeted for, that we have a system for. I think that's what I would need before looking at further steps, is a little more research. Because I don't disagree, like, we have people come up all the time, we have projects come up all the time, and they can seem wonderful. I've approved many of those. But then I also know we fall into a trap of losing track of how much funding we have given and where does it come from. With ARPA, we had a very unique opportunity to do that. But 4 years from now, we don't have that opportunity. So we do need a process in place. I don't dislike a yearly system. So it becomes common knowledge in the community. This is when we do it. I think given some of the disadvantages, potential disadvantages you pointed out, Austin, I would lean towards having a large engagement and even workshop assistance, similar to what we did with ARPA, that, this is kind of what you want to include, this is the information we'll need, this is the data you need. And I know we had some problem where some people were like, we don't even have a board. It's like, you need a board. Just to make sure T's are crossed and I's are dotted. If we go forward something like this, to not put smaller or newer, more inexperienced nonprofits at a disadvantage, because they could have great projects. Sorry, I'm gonna go back to your list, your presentation. Very clean presentation, by the way, thank you. I will appreciate that all day. And I think I would prefer a shorter turnaround on applications, so I think it's Orlando that has, not Orlando, which one has like almost a year? Where like you start in February and then, Miami-Dade, that tracks. Miami-Dade where you apply in February and then it's reviewed for a couple months and then it's reviewed again and then it's approved and you don't get money for another year. I don't like that. I would prefer something like within a 6 month turnaround, just to make it, if you're applying for money and you have this program and you have a need, I don't want to wait a year to address the need before funds are dispersed. So I would prefer something with a much faster turnaround. I'd like contracts going for 1 year as a concept, and it's an idea to float. If the application window could be open twice a year, I think that would help kind of diffuse a lot of the pressure from any one window, where if I don't get it in, I'm going to submit something sloppy that we still have to review anyway, versus if I don't have it just right, I can try again in 6 months, not dissimilar to what Harry just told us a little while ago, try again, and now you've learned from it. And I wouldn't mind, still yearly, but twice a year, you figure it out. Because the funding, whatever it is, will still be built into the budget as a finite number. We can work around it. I think those are my comments for now, but my biggest point right now is I would need to know what, in the past 2, 3, 4 years, what other, outside of these categories, nonprofits have we funded, and for what. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My reason for requesting this information was because of the groups coming to the City Commission during the year that do not follow a process, which is not fair to people who follow a process. We have funded community development block grant for years. It's a very clear process. The accountability measures are there. People know what to do. I am concerned that the county has a very orderly process with their CAP program. and the other cities, as you've seen here. I would suggest that we monitor this year, just sort of begin to keep track of groups that come in during the year that are really outside this process. Because we want to be sure we have accountability for funds that are dispersed, I think we're going to have a rash of organizations after 2024. I believe that's when the ARPA funds are to be expended. And so you have a number of nonprofits that got money that will be coming back through. And so we need to be prepared. I'm looking for a process. It's not something I'm looking to implement this fiscal year, but I would urge all of you to just monitor it as we come forward. So thank you. Very thorough job, Morgan and Austin. Appreciate it greatly. Thank you. I conclude. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
So that's one of my questions that came up is who currently keeps track of our ad hoc grants? Like, and what minimum do we track? Just even the dollar amount, the type, the structure of the organization asking, the timeline or contract period that they proposed spending it in. Do we keep track of that at all?
It's done on an individual departmental basis. The weakness for us is it needs to be done. And that's where the finance department and the budget office are right now trying to organize to fill that gap for the city. It is a gap. And I was going to comment that I mentioned the 111 plus the additional 32 or so agencies through ARPA. Many of them are getting double bites. You know, some of that is double counted. So I wanted to just make it clear that there's a double count here. And that could be avoided if there was a process that, you know, kind of flushed things out a little more.
Right.
So
one of my concerns was this idea of which one of these ad hoc grantees really should have been going through these other processes, these other priority, what we've laid out. And so part of that is if you don't track it, it's hard to go back and backwards.
that's true.
And quickly, this is just basically short comments as we potentially go forward. Is that sometimes an organization that only needs $5,000 or $10,000, they don't have a board. They certainly don't have any experience in grant writing. So I understand the idea of an easy process, and sometimes that's how it's funded. It's someone comes to us. We know, we trust these people. We've seen some of their work, some of their ad hoc work, and say we can help fund them. So that's Austin mentioned identifying that when you set up processes, it does become a barrier for sometimes. At first, I really liked the idea of past recipients reviewing, but then I thought, man, that just leads to bias of the same type of group, same type of people.
Your friends.
Your friends, right? So then that worried me. But at least the experience of how it helped individual groups might be interesting. And then I think I just one more quick. The idea of twice a year, as Commissioner Sacco mentioned, I think to advertising and promotion board or bureau, where I grew up in college, I think theirs was quarterly. That was less social justice, direct action, direct provision of services, and it was about drawing people to a community. It was funded out of sales tax revenue, but they did it on some sort of a rolling basis. And so if you did fail, you could come back again in the future. I think that's how their Pride Festival, their Bikes, Blues, Barbecue, kind of the festivals were funded. But they certainly didn't rely on a once a year process for that. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Book and then Commissioner Neckelwalker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when I was thinking about the process of grants, we're probably going to all be saying, yes, we need a process. There's no doubt about that, because you need a more fair and equitable process to make sure folks get through, and that you have a mechanism that also allows you to deny people that you can kind of hold your hat on. So that's clear. And there's no way we're going to be able to deal with probably the 100 to 200 components of a process right here at the table. I actually like the thought of 6 to 9 months to develop that process, because I had the same conversation with the manager that was briefly dealt with ARPA funds, and the fact that many of these community organizations their program is going to end when the funding ends. It's been provided the last 2 to 3 years, and that's nationwide. And what you typically want to see from organizations is sustainability in your community. So when the funding ends, you've given them the jump start, the incentivized, you've provided them the monies that allow them to get their infrastructure up, and then they're off and running. And hopefully their efforts are leveraged long after the funding from the city. And that's really a good process. So I would just say that there may be the opportunity here to give a several-month time lag for our city charters to come up with a process. Bring that back towards the end of this year because we need to have it in place before the budget cycle starts for fiscal year 2024. So that probably puts it, I think, in the February range that we have something ready to go as we start to talk about the budget and then we know the process. So that would be my thought, was the sustainability and perhaps the ability for the research to bring us back. What's the most objective process possible that allows us to manage our funds? And the idea that Commissioner Sacco said about potentially even looking way ahead of maybe 1 or 2 times across the year might allow organizations to have a little more flexibility when they're not quite able to plan quite that far in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Deckenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. Is there any kind of requirement currently of community-based organizations, nonprofits, et cetera, whoever comes to get money from us in any way for equity and inclusion training? Do we require that in any way?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
No? I see Phil saying no. Okay. That's something that's of interest to me because I think that this city over the last several years has said that equity is a priority for us. And I feel like if you are going to get money from the city, that we should in some way transfer that idea to you and ensure that it's a way that you're doing business. We're giving you money, the taxpayers' money, and equity is important to them, to us, and we need to ensure that you, however you are conducting your programs, that you are centering equity and inclusion. So that would be something that I would be interested in seeing made a part of that process. Interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with a person who is a part of a major organization that's affiliated with the county, and I asked them what their process was recently, and I said, have you all done any equity and inclusion training? And he said, you know, we have done it in the past, but it costs us $40,000. I said, what? $40,000. And then he went on to say, unfortunately, we have roughly, I'm so glad I didn't tell you the name of the organization, but we don't have nearly enough in our bank account to cover that training, and that was concerning to me. So, you know, clearly this type of training is big business, okay? There are entities that make a lot of money off of that for business purposes, but I think if it is a priority of the city, perhaps we can find a way, and I don't see Zariah in the back. Is he back? Is he back? Hi, Zariah. Hi. I'm throwing this out there as something that's on my wish list right now, that perhaps there may be a way for us to, and you and I spoke briefly about this yesterday, for us to infuse that somehow in the way that we as the city do business with those who are coming to us for money. So equity and inclusion is important. I wonder how we might be able to provide that training, and, well, I'll leave it right there and kind of let you speak to that.
Mayor and Commissioner Zariah Folsom, Director. Oh. I'm sorry. It's been over a year, so let me get used to it. So I apologize for that, Mayor and Commissioner. I'm Zariah Folsom, Director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Commissioner Duncan Walker did speak to me about that yesterday. That's the process that, to go to Ms. Chestnut's point, when we was at the county, the CAP process, they had requirements to get the money. So there were certain programmatic things that you had to do to get the money. We can work with staff to make sure we incorporate the fact that you need to have some form of equity training to be able to participate in the funding opportunities with the city of Gainesville. And it needs to be something that we can either provide for them, or it needs to be something that we can check off and say, yeah, that's suitable. It can't be, I'm assuming you're not looking for a web-based click on it. And, okay, I thought
Absolutely not.
So,
It would be wonderful. I think I would be interested in something that we could provide. I hate to, you know,
Okay.
I don't want to burden staff, but I think that if we've identified that as a priority, it's essential that we find a way to make sure that it moves forward.
If that's the will of the commission, we can move forward. in that
Thank you
direction.
very much.
Yes, ma'am.
I conclude.
Commissioner Eastman.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear us kind of talk through what the real goal of this is. I could see this kind of going in a number of different ways, and I appreciate that it's sort of, sounds like we're trying to figure out how we really depoliticize the process a little bit, that we're choosing people based on what they're bringing to the community, not necessarily how well they happen to know any one of us. What I think it's, so I think it's really important, we'll watch that. We'll say that we're coming out of a very odd year as it relates to how we interact with nonprofits. I don't think we have, are we okay? Have,
Are we evacuating?
I don't know.
We're locked in there.
We've never given out, I think, this amount of I can't imagine there's ever been a time we've given out this amount of nonprofit funding in the history of our city of Gainesville. I mean, $7 million just out of ARPA alone is huge, and we've expanded our partnerships out with organizations I care a lot about, like Grace Marketplace. We decided homelessness is a core service of ours, and we could partner with an outside entity that does that already and makes that work, right? I wouldn't necessarily want to put them through kind of an annual process, because now they're kind of an extension of one of our core services, but how do you separate those out, I think is worth looking at. But what I wouldn't want this, if we wanted to say we want to expand out, say like jumpstart money for nonprofits or for events, things like that, like I saw Pompano Beach, that seemed to be its focus. I think that's an interesting way to do it. I like that idea, but I kind of want us to make sure this doesn't grow into something where where nonprofits consistently see us as sort of the way, like a way to kind of get larger and larger amounts of funding. I mean, I think every organization really needs to focus on what it does and no one else does, so that it can do that the best that it possibly can, whether you're Santa Fe Police Department, whether you're a nonprofit. And at the core of what our city does, we do public transit, we do infrastructure, we do public safety, we do utilities, we regulate mostly land use. Increasingly, we're working more on housing, and I want to make sure that we're kind of consistently being focused on what we do the best at, what we're the only ones capable of doing, and kind of focus our funds in that direction. So I think it's good to have a new process and make sure that we're depoliticizing that as it comes forward. But I wouldn't want this to kind of continue to grow and put us more outside of those core things that the city needs to be doing very, very well at to make our system work well.
Mr. Mayor, if I might just interject, we have dedicated funding that comes in through HCD, CDBG Home Ship. ARPA was dedicated. GCRA, probably the most flexible, but if we're going to use an additional funding source for community-based organizations, general fund, and I just wanted to put that on the table. We don't have that pot of money right now budgeted. That would be a discussion that the commission would, of course, have and make the decision to set that aside.
So I'm excited by the conversation. I'll get to you. I just wanted to get my entry into the round, and then we'll get back to you. I'm excited to have a discussion about what we can do with nonprofits. That's my background. I love talking about nonprofits. In the past, what we've done is had a category of nonprofits that essentially the city said, the city organization said, we don't do this. We don't have a department for homelessness. We don't have a department for professional arts. Therefore, we're contracting basically, it's a grant, but it's essentially we're outsourcing Grace Marketplace to be handling homeless services for us. We're asking the professional arts organizations that exist to be the professional arts organizations, and we will pay you to go do those things. So that's one category of funding nonprofits. Then there's the category that really got supercharged last year with ARPA and with other available funds of money, things that we could really work with in different ways, and with CDBG, traditional, smaller but existing outwardly funded opportunities. And then there's this third category, which I think is what this probably speaks to, is folks who came to the city commission and watched a couple meetings or talked to individual commissioners and showed up and got on the agenda one way or another and had very specific, very impassioned pleas for how they were going to change and save lives in the community if we would just give them $30,000, or if we could just find $5,000 for them. And they all made good, really good pleas, and often we would find ways to fund them. Generally speaking, out of fund balance. That's not a good way for us to work as an organization. That's not new. It goes back many commissions. It's not a smart way for us to do it. And it leaves out organizations, very specifically, who don't know how to work the government, who don't know how to watch how the commission works and hit that sweet spot that's likely to work on any given meeting. So my hope is that this addresses specifically those folks, the ones who really do have a good case to make, but don't have, who aren't doing something that we don't already do, that we don't have a general need for, and that we don't have external funding for. So we've been funding it. We've been finding ways to do it. Some years it's as little as, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000. Some years it's gone well into six figures. It's just a question of being honest about it and saying, this is the amount we will spend on that. We will fund X dollars and we will stick to that. That's going to be the hard part. When we go through the process and then somebody who's been, who's very familiar with several commissioners and knows our system well, comes in and makes that $20,000 plea the last couple weeks of the fiscal year, the commission, this commission and future commissions then have to have the resolve to say, there was a process and we love you, but you didn't go through that process. And that's hard. That is really hard. And we will be faced with that, I promise you. When we put together a really great process, there's still going to be people who come make a great case that will save lives in our community. And we're going to have to find a way to be hard-hearted about that and say, no, we can't do it this time. Just saying that going forward. A thing that I learned through the ARPA process is that the Community Foundation is pretty good at helping with this sort of thing. And they can be useful to us. And I would like us, as we build this, to reach out to them and have conversations with them. Because another thing they can do is if somebody doesn't fit our process, there are other folks that they can recommend for funding in that. They can point inexperienced nonprofits to other donors that the city of Gainesville is not. And we probably shouldn't be in a position of doing that, of walking people to providing technical assistance in ways that don't fit a process. But that's what the Community Foundation does. That's part of the reason they exist. And there are other groups that do that very well also. So I would hope that in the process of building a process, we would include input from community groups who are good at this. I also would like us to maybe, I like the idea of doing it twice a year, but I'm thinking once could be for existing nonprofits who have perhaps been funded in the past and who are fairly well established, and maybe once could be an opportunity for new nonprofits that are just getting on their feet and can meet some level of expectation, but are not quite there yet. And we've had incubators for small businesses before. I would love for us to have an incubator type process for nonprofits. Gainesville's a nonprofit town. I'd like us to be able to help growing nonprofits professionalize and get better at what they do. And part of what they have to learn how to do is find money. And if we could give them that leg up, I think that would be useful. There are other organizations in town already doing that, and we should connect with them as well. Okay, so, I wanted to address the equity standard also. I wonder if we could create some kind of equity qualifying process where an organization or a business could show not only the city of Gainesville, but other institutions and the community at large that yes, we've been through a process and we are a city of Gainesville authorized equity provider. We get it. We've been through the training. We take it seriously. We meet the expectations. And then rather than telling everybody who applies, you got to go through a training process, they can say, we did your process and we love it and here's how it's working in our organization. And they can show their equity badge that they take it seriously and that they've done this. That's kind of a separate thing from what we're talking about here. But I think that's maybe something that we could kickstart.
I can really appreciate that because also in my conversation yesterday, I said to Zariah, what if equity and inclusion training was something that was just available to anybody who wanted to take it? So I really like that.
Yeah, and then they meet the qualifications and they can put their thumbprint on that when they put an application through somewhere. Cool. Yeah, let's think on that as we go through this process. Commissioner Sacco, you had more comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was a bit of a lead off of Commissioner Eastman's comment, you don't want somebody coming back every year or coming for larger and larger amounts of money, and then we're the only ones bankrolling a nonprofit. That's not the goal I want. I think as we look at it, and I just ask that we bring back the data I asked for, like what programs, what organizations outside of these programs we have funded, just to get that tally, because we can keep tracking going forward, but we have years of data going back. And I would move to get that information, or just ask that staff bring it back.
Yeah,
We don't need a
without
motion.
objection, I think that's, yeah.
Cool. And I think the direction that I hear would be most sustainable would be like capital or seed money or programmatic. Like I need this equipment to be able to do this programming, or I need to rehab this building to be able to help with homelessness issues, or I need whatever piece of equipment. Or if you give me funding for 1 year, I can train up my staff, we can learn how to write grants, we can start the fundraising process, and we're self-sustaining thereafter, because that first year we don't have to figure out how do I pay the people doing this. So I think as far as like what we would be funding, those would kind of be the directions I'd like to look at. And I would like to see the data from before, that way we could see like, is that what we've done, or have we been like, here, pay people's salary, we don't care. And I hope that's not the answer. Just to see what our historic trends have been, what our leanings have been in the past, and has that been successful? Have those nonprofits like gone on to continue that programming on their own? Great. Or if it's something that then we have been the lifeline for. So I think being able to get some of that data would be the best, but going forward, I agree with you and Commissioner Eastman that we should probably narrow down, I guess, the uses and purposes of those funds. But yeah, I think a second discussion after some more data would be the next step, at least in my mind.
So, any other commissioners want to weigh in here, or? I think what I'm hearing is that we would like to have more research come back to us with a couple of different options.
We'll be happy to work with the
That would be
policy
great.
research team to gather information, and when they return for the report, we'll be a part of gathering information.
Very good. Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak to this one before we move on? Going once, going twice? Okay. Commissioner Book.
I'll just say that a good process that's developed will deal with funding ups and downs, because the process will remain the process regardless. In 1 year, we'll have less money, and 1 year, we'll have more money, and that will also address some of those things like sustainability and the capability for organizations to have good professional development. I agree with what the Mayor Pro Tem says. You have some basic requirements of organizations that come before you, and that's part of the process. And one of them is they have to do the right thing in the way that they treat their community. And another is they have to be accountable in their financial practices. So there might be part of the process I would just put out there for comments as that's developed is think about what is the professional development suite that would be part of the process that we need to make sure these organizations do, because it will help them also, and it will help us be fiscally sound. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I think it's an opportunity to share too that our employees at the City of Gainesville have a long history of doing a charitable campaign, and typically the employees of the City of Gainesville provide somewhere around $50,000 a year, and a lot of that's to local charities as well as our employees and our customers provide the project share that provides for people's utility bills through 3 local agencies. And so those are, I just want to mention in the midst of this conversation, other opportunities that our employees here and our residents, and citizens and neighbors contribute as well.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, well, let's move on from that one. Thank you all so much for the presentation and for the yeah, I do want to, it's 2:40, let's come back at 2:50, let's stretch our legs and get focused and check our phones and such and come back. Yep. No, that's
thought they would have put one down here, but
Is that a motion? I'll make it.
No, I got a clock in the office.
I
I'll
think,
just take it.
I think Sandy's listening, but
That's good. All right, Madam Clerk.
Our next item is item 2022-13, Equitable Development Frameworks, with the recommendation that the committee hear presentation from staff and discuss. Okay.
Ready for me? Hi, Mayor and Commissioners. Morgan Spicer, Interim Policy Oversight Administrator. I am here today to share the research that was done on equitable development frameworks. This research was conducted by one of our other fellows, Bumnut Abitu, but they are in class right now, so I will be doing this presentation for you all. So policy process has not changed since last presentation, so we're in phase 2. And we'll start with a little bit of just general information on equitable development. So equitable development can be defined as policies and programs that are put into place to meet the needs of underserved communities that help to reduce disparities in areas like affordable housing, transportation, and food access, while ensuring that cities are healthy and vibrant in that process. Equitable development needs a strong process of goals, flexibility of purpose, and an ability to adapt to circumstances related to progressive change. And so in order to encourage equitable development, frameworks can be created by local governments that provide common definitions and help guide policy creation and analyzing initiatives related to equitable development. So before we get into equitable development frameworks generally, they are sort of a guiding document from a city, so we also wanted to outline what comprehensive plans are since they are also a city guiding document. Comprehensive plans are long-range planning documents designed to articulate the vision, goals, and strategies that steer growth and development. Comprehensive plans can include elements like land use, historic preservation, conservation, and housing, and then depending on the municipality, comprehensive plans can also have an explicit focus on equity. Equitable development frameworks, meanwhile, are designed to present integrated strategies to close racial disparities. So while comprehensive plans may include those elements, that's sort of the explicit focus of an equitable development framework. They can look differently, as we'll see a little bit later in this presentation, but essentially they function as a tool to help guide the implementation of policies designed to reduce disparities. And again, they are designed typically to kind of supplement comprehensive plans, maybe fill in gaps that comprehensive plans don't address, or they can also explicitly be tools to help achieve the goals outlined in a comprehensive plan. So in the state of Florida, every city or municipality is required by law to update their comprehensive plans every 5 to 7 years. And the city's proposed update to the comprehensive plan, Imagine GNV 2030, does take a more explicit equity focus and highlights strategies and tactics that Gainesville can take to alleviate some disparities. In addition to Imagine GNV 2030, equity and equitable development are not new terms to the City Commission. In your all's backup, there is a memo that was compiled by the Department of Sustainable Development, which outlines previous work related to equitable development and sort of current and ongoing strategies. So I won't outline all of those here, but some of them include things like community land trusts and heritage overlay districts. But we will go a little bit more in depth on what Imagine GNV 2030 looks like, just since it is a little bit relevant to our conversation today. And so, as mentioned, Imagine GNV 2030 has been proposed to help ensure that racial equity in Gainesville is ingrained into the city's comprehensive plan. And is an effort to update the comprehensive plan with an effort of bringing together community members who have not historically had a seat at the table and to help address the impacts of systemic racism. There are 3 guiding pillars of Imagine GNV: centering Black and marginalized residents in Gainesville, involving the whole city organization, and generating accountability and action. And then within Imagine GNV, there are 9 focus areas like education, transportation, and the environment. And each of these focus areas has outcomes and indicators and strategies to help guide policymaking. And so we bring that up because Imagine GNV does share some similarities with the frameworks that we'll be looking at today. So the policy ideas that are developed in Imagine GNV do generally align with the definition of equitable development, and it does function as a plan with goals and strategies based on these values of reducing disparities. However, there are some differences that we'll look at later. Imagine GNV may not contain some of the more explicit language that equitable development frameworks provide in terms of providing explicit direction and framing for the city's approach to equitable development. And Imagine GNV also might be lacking some of the accountability tools that we'll see in some of these other frameworks. So these are the municipalities we'll be looking at today. And we are going to start out with Seattle, Washington. So Seattle's Equitable Development Framework is part of their larger Equitable Development Implementation Plan. And the intention of the framework is to guide city decisions to address inequities and translate their comprehensive plan policies into action. So this includes having foundational equity objectives to guide the framework, equity drivers, and equity outcomes to help influence those equity objectives. Seattle's implementation plan as a whole is really structured around these two data measurement tools, their displacement risk index and their access to opportunity index. And these are really at the forefront of their equitable development work and are designed to help inform the city's growth strategy and help them analyze where projects are most needed and help analyze the impact of those projects. Seattle's Equitable Development Framework builds on Puget Sound Regional Equity Network's principles of equitable development. And so it's structured around creating two equity objectives, that is strong communities and great places with equitable access. So each of these equity objectives have a series of equity drivers within the implementation plan. So for example, one of these strong communities equity drivers is the advancement of economic opportunity, which then includes a focus on a variety of equitable outcomes, such as effective education, closing racial disparities in employment and jobs, closing racial disparities in access to wealth, and closing racial disparities in business success. So those equity objectives, drivers, and outcomes are the primary functionality of Seattle's framework, but then Seattle also goes on within their implementation plan to outline some systemic changes that would need to occur in order to help achieve those objectives. And so that includes using equity criteria to help to select community development and planning projects, forming organizational structures across departments to set priorities, establish shared goals, and advise on budget decisions, integrating equity into departments' plans and investment criteria, and monitoring progress to ensure accountability and responsiveness. Their plan goes more in depth on what each of these means and what stakeholders would be involved in these various tasks. So for example, under the monitoring progress task, they outline some short and long-term indicators to help Seattle measure growth. So for example, a short-term indicator is something where the data can be collected annually, like housing cost burden, while a longer-term indicator might be something that, like proximity to grocery stores, where the data is only collected as allowed. And then lastly, Seattle has a stewardship plan to help hold leadership accountable and make sure that these goals are being accomplished. Up next, we have Ramsey County, Minnesota, which is in some ways very similar to Seattle and in other ways very different. So Ramsey County's main focus is to keep racial equity at the center of decision making. And so this means that their framework is designed to provide criteria that will guide internal evaluation of things like property acquisition or development decisions, and also help advance county goals related to things like transportation and housing and community development. Ramsey County's framework first outlines their county's goals, including advancing racial equity and eliminating ethnic-based disparities. And then they outline their 9 drivers of equitable development, including advancement of economic opportunity and preventing displacement. These drivers of equitable development are the same that you'll see in Seattle's plan, because both of these communities heavily utilized the Government Alliance of Race and Equity, or GARE, and so you see a lot of that language is very similar between these two plans. Where Ramsey County differs from Seattle is that they then highlight different principles or sectors of equitable development, including things like community engagement, land use, housing, and transportation. And then they outline a series of factors that need to be considered when you are taking on those types of projects to ensure that vulnerable populations are centered. So for example, this includes questions like how were affected community members involved in the development of the project, how would the project connect to an existing neighborhood, how would the project improve housing stability, and things of that nature. And then lastly, the framework outlines a variety of feasibility considerations like cost and benefits of a project, fiscal impact, and things of that nature. And so you don't see Seattle's framework go into this type of question and answer that Ramsey County does. Our next example is out of Vancouver, and their framework exists to fill a coordination gap in the city's equity work. So their equity framework is not intended to be an action plan, but more of a conceptual or foundational document out of which more action plans or toolkits will then flow. Vancouver's framework starts off with providing a variety of definitions and history related to Vancouver's equity work. And then they outline their 6 equity commitments, which are long-term engagement, spaces for learning, representation and leadership, fostering relationships, adequate resourcing, and shared accountability. Vancouver approaches the sort of design of these different commitments through 4 lenses: Indigenous rights, racial justice, intersectionality, and systems orientation. And their vision is that when these 4 lenses are used to frame a problem or approach a decision, then the outcome of that will be leading the city in the right direction of their equitable development work. So they do provide examples of what these lenses mean in practice. So things like partnership with Indigenous nations on infrastructure planning, designation of geographic areas in the city that are of significance to cultural communities, and integrating an equity lens into the city's budget process. Vancouver also outlines 3 different imperatives, which outline why they are undertaking this equity framework. And that includes the justice imperative, the compliance imperative, and the effectiveness imperative. So functionally, their belief is that in order for Vancouver to be a just government that complies with existing laws and is as effective as possible, they need to be pursuing equitable development work in this fashion. And then finally, Vancouver outlines 4 different priority areas to help share the areas in the city that will play a role in this work. So foundation is related to infrastructure, internal is related to HR functions, external is related to community functions, and then bridging is the linkages between those different functions. And then the last example that we have is not technically an equitable development framework. It is a vision plan called St. Pete 2050, which is designed to help inform future decisions and guide plans and programs through St. Petersburg in support of its sustainable and equitable growth over the next 30 years. So St. Pete 2050 was a community-oriented project. So from August of 2019 to June of 2020, the city hosted a variety of workshops and activities and collected feedback from St. Petersburg residents to find out what they wanted from their city and what change they wanted to see in their city. And then the intention was that that feedback would be collected and integrated into St. Pete 2050 and then ultimately integrated into future comprehensive plans to help guide future decision making. The 10 themes that came out of St. Pete 2050 include things like arts and culture, housing, DEI, education, and several others. And then each of these themes then has a mission and also a set of goals to achieve to advance that mission. So for example, under arts and culture, one goal is to help artists being able to live and work in St. Petersburg. And under housing, a goal is to minimize involuntary displacement. So again, this is not explicitly an equitable development framework, but that does function very similarly to some of the equitable drivers and equitable outcomes that you see in equitable development frameworks. So lastly, just with some potential considerations related to why or why you might not want an equitable development framework. Equitable development frameworks can help to drive policy and program creation, and also allowing the city to be aligned in regards to its view on equitable development and what it means to achieve equitable development. And also equitable development frameworks that have a data analysis tool like you see in Seattle could help the city to more effectively measure the impact of that work. However, there are some considerations as to potential challenges to implementing this policy. Of course, I outlined that the city has a comprehensive plan and the proposed update to the comprehensive plan. The city also has a strategic plan and a variety of other guiding documents, and so it may become difficult to understand what takes priority in policy creation with the creation of additional framework. Additionally, an independent equitable development framework could duplicate existing equitable development work. And of course, equitable development is a very complex topic. The creation of frameworks are very complex when they're intended to be guiding documents. And so this would be a document that would take a lot of time and thought to create and to be effective. And so that's what I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions on the research, but thank you all.
Thank you, Morgan.
I just gonna ask, can you go back 2 slides? I just wasn't fast enough.
Which this?
I'm trying to read the advantages and disadvantages.
Oh, yes.
Both those.
Commissioner Wood?
My only thought is on the advantages, one of the advantages is just the right thing to do. And that's an advantage, right, to do the right thing. So it's kind of one of those simple practical, and I don't think it's at odds with concrete information either. So some people might say, oh, that's an opinion, and it isn't not an opinion, because equitable opportunity is the right thing to do. So I think that's an advantage. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. I can really appreciate that. And thank you to Morgan and Bumnut, who's not able to be with us right now because she's in class. She put a lot of time and energy into doing some really good research on a topic that's very, very important to me. Well before I came to the commission, I was some feet in the street. I was on the steps of this very city hall with regards to a very serious community issue that community residents in the historic Fifth Avenue, Pleasant Street community had rallied around. And I had no idea at that time that something was being dropped into my spirit that was not a new idea at all. I realized that at that time, the individuals that were coalescing around the preservation of history, the preservation of heritage, the creation or the protection of affordable housing in the urban core, and the belief in development without displacement created this organization that became known as the Gainesville Alliance for Equitable Development. I had no idea at the time that equitable development was actually a thing. I found it through a Google search, and I realized that this idea of equity in the way that we grow was something that cities across this country were already exploring. It was something that nonprofits were already doing extensive work in, and it was something that centered community in a process. And we began to do a lot of that work, and we communicated with individuals in the city as we worked to salvage what we believed were opportunities to preserve people. Preserve people. And so as I came to the commission, first of all, I ran on that. And as I came here, that remained a priority for me, because I realized that what people were doing in other places was actually working. We started to see that there were outcomes that were beneficial to individuals who were made a part of the process and who had an actual voice in the way that communities grew. I really was excited and still am excited about hearing from all of you. I don't want to belabor this point because literally this is a topic that I could probably talk about all day. I do want to say a couple of things to some of Morgan's points. I first want to say that I believe that our comprehensive plan is a cutting-edge document. And in putting forward this idea for this framework, it is in no way designed to take anything away or say that there is even something missing. But I do believe that we have opportunity to expand and to even be intentional about equitable development. And that's the whole reason that I wanted to have this conversation today. You've seen several examples of how various cities across this country are going about it. I think that too should give us all a little more insight about what we may be able to do. I think that this framework actually dovetails in a very easy and meaningful way. If this is something that we decided that we wanted to actually move forward on, I can envision this dovetailing with our comprehensive and our strategic plans. The comp plan for me in a lot of ways is like a first step. For me, this framework actually gives us the ability to actually make the decision. It guides those decisions, every decision. It, for me, actually speaks to how we operationalize equity in our growth. So I will stop talking and anxiously await the communique and the ideas from all of my colleagues around the table about this really important and very exciting topic to me.
Commissioner Walker, I like the way you put that about operationalizing equity. It's something I've struggled with for a long time as someone who cares deeply about this, but I think like a lot of people struggles with how do you actually take kind of the broad idea of equity and you put it into exact policy. And someone who likes reading history myself, I also noticed that a lot of the things that we look back on at times that were so clearly wrong, like redlining, like slum clearance, you read it at the time and it all seems so like innocuous, like another bureaucratic movement that is just, you know, there's hardly ever the racial undertones we now know were they verbalized at the times they're coming forward? So how do you, without people putting up a flag saying, this is the reason I'm passing it, how do you figure out what is going to move us in a better direction, what isn't? And so I know that previously the commission passed GARE's racial equity toolkit. And that, I read about that a number of years ago and just found it very exciting. Like, it was a real way to actually operationalize some of this stuff, where you're actually reviewing things and checking for the data, not just what we say we care about with equity, but what is this actually going to do to impact people, and how do we bring those people's voices in there and make it a part of how we do day-to-day business and government. I'd be curious, from the Office of Equity Inclusion, we've been on this path for a number of years now. I know it's had it's had its back and forth, and I'd be curious if I could hear from Zariah where we are in that process of implementing that, so then we can talk about what our next steps can be for this one.
Before Zariah comes, I can really appreciate your reference back to GARE, Commissioner Eastman, because you're absolutely right. Commissioner Gail Johnson, I believe, was one of the champions of this effort, and she and I had a long conversation, because this was when we actually were dealing with, and in the process of creating the Gainesville Alliance for Equitable Development, I brought her attention to the fact that equitable development was a major part of this instrument. It is my understanding that our relationship with this organization is no longer existent, yet the work, the $200,000 that we spent on this plan does not stop us from doing this work. So the fact that this relationship is no longer intact, for me, does not impede our ability to move forward. So I welcome it and really look forward to the interaction that you'll have with Zariah here. But this definitely was a great thing to move forward. Equitable development was something we committed to by way of adopting this, and I think we can still continue that work.
Mayor, Commissioner Zariah Folsom, Director for the Office of Equity and Inclusion. So some of you have participated, some of you haven't yet, but it's on your schedule to come and meet with us to talk about our equity work and how we operationalize equity here at the City of Gainesville as we move forward. RBA is one of those things that can help strengthen. When I look through some of the documents and when I think about what it is that Commissioner Duncan Walker is really trying to achieve, I think there could possibly be some level of integration and synergy between our comp plan process and providing some sense of a framework that allows us to be able to equitably hold people accountable. I was in a meeting once, somebody said something powerful. A feeling without data is just a perception, right? And so anytime we talk, oh yeah, that's going on with East Gainesville. As soon as somebody says East Gainesville, everybody goes, oh yeah, you're right. But what is the data saying about it? And so that's one of the things that we want to incorporate with RBA and making sure that we can have performance measures and things to hold people accountable. So when I look at what we're proposing to do, that accountability piece has to be there. And I think there could be some synergies with the framework to get us to where we're trying to get to. But I think that's something that if you approve this at this level, it comes back to the charter group and we meet with the people over in, I forgot the name of your department. Sustainable development. I was going to say forest, but sustainable development, so that we can talk about what this framework would look like, because I think we need to have some more discussions around it, because I know the comp plan is looking at some things from an equity standpoint, but I think what Commissioner Duncan Walker is looking for, and possibly some of you, is a framework so that we better get an understanding of, okay, how do we make these decisions, and then how, after decisions have been made, we can come back and evaluate the success of those decisions. And we need to do that through data. The last thing I'll share about that data component in piece is this. Not only will incorporating some of those RBA principles allow us to be able to have performance managers that we can hold people accountable, but as we set those, we set now an expectation of what we want to see the outcomes be for our community. Because those are not just decisions that we make together. Hopefully, if we do come up with a framework down the line, that we engage the community to say, hey, okay, what do you want the outcomes to look like within your community? And we take that data to come back and say, hey, this is how we've done it. The last thing I'll share with you, for us to be able to do that, I will tell you, we need a data governance policy. And that's something that the charters we've been discussing and talking about, and it's something that's in the work. How we collect it, how we utilize it as a city, how we evaluate it, all those things are going to be important as we talk about equity moving forward. And if you guys talk about it in context of this framework, it's definitely going to be essential to determine how successful we've been. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, I think what the Office of Equity, at least what I have seen from the outside, not that the Office of Equity and Inclusion speak for themselves with it, but that, I was very excited when Commissioner Johnson passed this, and what we found upon implementation was that a lot of these cities had kind of had put their equity data and analysis into kind of a robust data analysis. They already existed, like Seattle already had policy reviews, they already had data reviews, they already had things like that, and then equity was they'd say, okay, well, this is central to us, we need to make sure that this is a central part of the policy process. And we just we don't have that kind of thing filled out. So as I think what Office of Equity and Inclusion discovered is that they're kind of building from scratch how exactly do you analyze policies, hold us accountable to what we want the outcomes to be, as well as how do you make it equitable. And I believe what they're working on when I spoke with them was about something called results-based accountability, which really takes to, as we pass policy, what outcomes are we looking for, how do we hold ourselves accountable over the long term and continue to track that? And I think that works really well with Mayor Ward. You're working on a dashboard right now. I know I'm kind of a data junkie myself. I like putting things in spreadsheets. I think this commission could really dovetail numerous things together in some of the priorities that you have and the priorities that you have and priorities that I have and other folks have to have us have a more robust policy analysis and data analysis process that takes equity as a really central component to that. So I'm really glad that you brought this up. And I have some other thoughts on ways we can go about that, but I'll hear what other commissioners have to say.
Anybody else? Mr. Willis?
Yeah, when I listen to this, and some of it I don't have a full grasp of what framework is as opposed to comp plan, and as opposed to a lot of the more straightforward ordinances we pass and programs and policies of the city. And it just reminded me that sometimes, perhaps as an average person looking into it, I know that I'm not, I'm far more in policy than the average person, but development, even as a word, is so prescriptive and future-oriented, and what is currently legal but might not result in equitable development, equitable results, versus what is already restricted, what is already illegal, and is not kind of in our imagination. And so I struggle sometimes with understanding, and perhaps this is how maybe our neighbors and citizens react. When they react to development as what is potentially legal, but there's a question about what it's going to result in, right? Versus we've already closed off the imagination because we have made certain things already illegal, whether it's not perhaps illegal, but less likely to occur. Manufactured housing, right? Like that's something that has disappeared from large portions of our community, our county. And so not that it is illegal per se, but that it is less likely to occur for policy reasons. And so when we look at development, it really stuck with me is that a portion of this, and maybe that's involved in the framework, but usually development is a very what are we going to do? What's legal? We just want to do it. And how do we massage it, change it, properly implement it? So I do think a little bit about remembering what is perhaps in the past made illegal that has fallen out of our imagination. A quadruplex is a very good example of this. It existed in many quarters of our city, harmoniously with other housing, temporarily illegal in the city for 50, 60, 70 years, brought back to being legal. And so our imagination of what development can be is ruled by some of these other existing laws. So I think about that. And then also, I don't understand fully how this framework, like you said, layers on top of or works harmoniously with the comprehensive plan. What little I do know is that time equals money, and particularly in the development of housing. Any kind of delay in housing is a delay of housing human beings, right? Our human beings. And so I wonder how it fits in, because I don't know enough about it, whether it is how it syncs and is harmonious with comprehensive plan and all other existing development processes, so that it's not just something to extend the time. And my question immediately was about the racial equity toolkit as well, but Director Folston kind of talked a little bit about what they currently do or what could be done. And then the data is always also important to me, because I think sometimes we are surprised. We have these assumptions. Even policymakers have these assumptions, and then they see data and like, oh, that is not what I thought. We see it about assumptions about crime. We see it in assumptions about, I was thinking about recent pedestrian deaths nationwide. Some people think that pedestrian and bike deaths is not a racial issue. It absolutely is, because the statistics tell us that it is not equally felt. So, yeah, and then the last comment is one that I don't know if I'm afraid to make or not, but it feels sometimes like a dangerous time to be committed to diversity, equity, inclusion in the state of Florida, but I'm glad we are brave enough to continue despite threatening stormy waters. Thank you.
Commissioner Willetts. Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does Mr. Folston want to jump in though?
Yeah, I do want to clarify something, Mayor and Commissioners. When we think about equitable development too as a framework, it's really about addressing disparities within your community. So I want to make sure I'm extra clear. It's bigger than just comp plan. So it's comp plan. It's how we handle transportation. It's how we handle affordable housing. It's how we handle those that are less fortunate in our community, the homeless. So it's looking at all of those things, how we can do all of those services and provide them to our community in a more equitable way. So I want to make sure that I know I mentioned forest, but I don't want to just pin it just on forest. This is how we look holistically at our community as well.
Thank you, Mr. Folston. I'm glad you said that because it leads into what I was going to say. We can always pin things on forest. That's fine. Sustainable development is there for us to pin things on it. No, but I have had OEI's training already, and I think that the lens, I think that they're trying to build over there works very much with what you're proposing here. But as Mr. Folston said, the development isn't just the construction of a building, it's the development of the city, period. I know that they are underway on some areas and some departments, and that it's going to be a long march to where we are. And no good thing is easy. It's always a long struggle to get to the end goal, and there's really no end here, just surpassing goals. To that point, though, as far as creating a separate framework, I think we're already doing it. I think OEI is already in that process of going department by department to see what it is that they put out to make sure equity is one of the main focuses in it without creating a separate document to guide it.
Can we get Zariah up to, Zariah?
You're on deck.
And thank you, of course.
Because I don't know if you've already done their training,
Well,
like they've shown you.
I have not, but I have had conversations with both of these gentlemen, and they have not expressed that we're already doing it. In fact, they've supported this.
So we are not in sustainable development at the moment. I think we are starting in Parks and Rec, which is why I brought up the point of like, it's more than just the construction of things.
Absolutely.
It is in all of our departments. But I think the direction OEI is going is what you're asking for. It is centering equity in the decision-making that we do of placement, of infrastructure placement, of bus routes, what programming we do in parks, how we, where we put our funding, all of that is part of what they're trying to do, which I think is what you're asking for, to put equity as one of the main lenses we look through.
Right. So, Mayor and Commissioners, she's correct. Some of you have not gone through the training yet, so you'll hear a very robust presentation. Some of you have already heard of what we're trying to do in terms of operationalize it, because we want to look at greater than just one aspect of our city. We're trying to operationalize it so it's in every facet of what the decision-making process that we do and that we ultimately turn around and fund. So with that being said, I want to give a shout out. I know I just said shout out. I want to give a shout out to our city manager, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it's because of the partnership that she's allowed us with Parks and Rec and Cultural Affairs that we're in the midst of a pilot. Right now, I think we're up to almost 200 and something performance measures that we're developing with them. So we already started the process of operationalizing so that they can see how this will work on a day-to-day basis, right? In terms of interacting with their programming, in terms of what type of programming they provide to the community. But as we move into that data governance piece, What I want to be able to, us to be able to have is what the city of Seattle has, San Antonio has something as well. Some of you have seen the dashboards where we can now go in and say, okay, in terms of your programming, how come we're not providing more money to X nationality or X race? How much dollars are we providing to transgenders community? Whatever that issue is, we want to be able to go in and be able to see that data on a dashboard. So I'm glad you hear you doing a dashboard, because we've been presenting that in our operationalizing in terms of that process. But she's correct. It's going to be something that's going to be holistic. So it won't just pigeonhole us to one thing, if you will. I hope we are going to embrace it, to go to your point, citywide, no matter what the process is that we implement, that's something that we're going to start to do.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton.
Yep.
So that's kind of, I think holistic was the word I need, where they're already looking at the holistic approach to it, not in any one, like, spectrum or degree.
Okay, yeah, to that point, because this is something, Mr. Folsom, please don't
On your
leave.
calendar.
It's a workout.
So, in my quest to bring forward a framework, this for me is holistic, it's also kind of comprehensive, and it puts things in a centralized place. Is this your initiative? Is this a plan? Is this a piecemealing of things? Because it is.
It's helpful. I didn't want to interrupt you. This is helpful.
I don't have.
So what that does is, because what I'm hearing today is, if I'm hearing correctly, there's a passion for this and to move into something that's holistic, equitably in terms of how we handle the comp plan, transportation, whatever that issue is. We can work with the city manager and her staff for us, for example, to talk about, okay, how our processes can integrate with their processes, so that when you guys start asking those questions in terms of from an equity standpoint, they'll be able to produce along with us the data themselves, right? But that's going to take us having those level of conversations and integration to be able to do it. What we've been presenting to the commissioners is that operationalizing it, and so that each individual department will have ownership of it. So what happened is the commission won't have to call me up to say, hey, it's right, was we equitable on such and such and such. No, the staff themselves will be able to articulate, here's how we met our equity objectives. This is how we operationalize equity for this program. This is how we operationalize equity for this bid procurement process in terms of who we hired, why we hired them. You know what I'm saying? You'll have that data. They'll have that data, and right now we're going through that process with our pilot and cultural affairs to show them how that looks on a day-to-day basis, so that PRCA won't have to call B and say, hey, you know, we're thinking about such and such and such. They'll remember from their training, they'll have the guidance to be able to provide it themselves. Now, that means we'll still be there as an assist, we'll still be there to support, but at the same time, we'll be there to be that sort of check and balance for the board to say, okay, I know they're saying they did this, OEI, how did they do it? Did they do it the correct way? And we'll be able to provide that level of guidance to them. But our hope is that we can empower our community builders to be equitably responsible themselves, and to be able to start implementing this on a day-to-day basis in their departments and in their areas. That's our plan.
Okay.
So I like what you're talking about today, because that just says to me, even without you making a motion, I can tell you that now, that says to me and Forrest got to have some conversations. Me and the city manager got to have some conversations, and let's figure out how we operationalize this thing as it pertains to planning or whatever those issues are, so that you guys can have confidence when it comes back to you, it's already taking those things into consideration.
So Commissioner, if I may, I think this framework, the lens, the map, whatever department we put in it, it will be different. You'd have to design it per department. GPD being equitable is different from PRCA being equitable. Just different functions overall. So I think the pilot Zarai is talking about is a good example of working out the kinks in a, I love parks, I love Roxy, if she hears this, I don't mean it the way it sounds, in a lower stakes kind of environment. Like, nobody has guns in PRCA, so it's a lower stakes environment to try to figure out, you know, what those questions are, what those measures are, what those markers are. Because I know you want a citywide and holistic approach. We all do. It has to start somewhere. So I think the pilot is working out the kinks in, I don't mean it the way it sounds, in a lower stakes department, to then figure out what those measures, those markers, how we do a dashboard for each, how we data, I'm going to use data as a verb, how we data each department before moving it on to the other. So Forrest's department is on there. Like, that is definitely it, but it's, I feel, a heavier lift. So we are working, my understanding is OEI is working through it on parks to then move department to department And as you get more departments in, it becomes easier, it just becomes second nature, and the departments are running themselves in that equity lens. So that's why I kind of sit here going, I like what you're doing because somebody explained it to me last week. And so I think it's great, but I think we have like one foot in the door already. And my preference would be to watch what he does, like finish out the pilot with PRCA to see if that is similar to the measurements you're looking for, to see if that system is, because it seems that they are halfway to getting what you are asking for anyway. So I would suggest letting the pilot finish out to see if the end result is what you want.
Thank you for that.
Because they're already halfway.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Sacco. I think the pilot that they're doing speaks to a fraction of what this is.
Oh, yeah.
And so while I can appreciate that, Zariah and I have had a couple of conversations about where they are, and we won't do it right now, Zariah, but I could consider that. I will say that this framework, as you have mentioned, and as everybody around this table knows, it's a big thing. It's a heavy lift. It's nothing that could possibly be created in any short amount of time. It will take all hands on deck. But I think what is interesting and what is meaningful and potentially very beneficial about the whole thing is everything that it draws on, how it brings everything together in one place under this idea of development. And really, I think the creative parts about bringing in, how the city runs and operationalizes equity, those things are very important, but we can't forget that the ultimate definition of equitable development actually does begin and end with community. It begins and ends out with the people. So this to me is, I don't want to call it ancillary like it's insignificant in any way, but it's kind of more, it's more supportive. So I can appreciate those. I think those things, we can do work concurrently. So whatever, Zariah's office is doing now, I think is absolutely wonderful. I look forward to hearing more about it and hearing what they come up with. However, these other pieces are critical, and we know that the community is asking us for it now. They're asking. If you don't mind, if I can read something, you'll be somewhat familiar with this, but the Environmental Protection Agency has information on equitable development, and they list several examples of how it's been lived out. They are in one area talking about the Fruitville Transit Village, and I just want to use this example because it's familiar with something that we've relatively recently experienced here. So in the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, BART, they had the option of advancing a construction proposal which lacked community support. How often are we faced with that? Or working with the residents of the Fruitvale District to devise a plan for the area. The Fruitvale community, with support of the Unity Council, rejected BART's proposal. We've heard that before. For a multi-level parking garage as being poorly conceived and designed. Residents in the community didn't have objections to new construction. Instead, they wanted BART to plan with them rather than for them. Eventually, the Transit Authority decided it would be better to invest in public involvement and frame a vision that would be informed by the local knowledge of residents who would be impacted by the project. The outcome is a transit-oriented development that helps to connect the community rather than act as a buffer between neighborhood assets. Fruitvale Transit Village is a clear reminder that penetrating new audiences and leveraging untapped talent will be critical to the success of place-based initiatives. I just wanted to use that because we're very familiar with this, right? And oftentimes, I think a lot of us around this table perhaps kick ourselves about how we can engage a little bit better, how we can bring the community to the table a little bit better. This is just one of those guiding frameworks, guiding documents, methodologies that we can use to do that. And this is just one example of a project in which equitable development was utilized to create. It's just one way to do it. So I think that we have a blank canvas in terms of what equitable development means to Gainesville. That's really why I wanted to have this conversation. The other cities that we saw in the examples that Morgan presented today have all defined what their cities are by way of equitable development. And my desire is that the city of Gainesville defines who we are in that way. If it is the will of this commission, I'm not looking for this to happen overnight, but I definitely would love it if we could take steps forward in this way. I think it's fulfilling a promise that we've made to the people of this town. It's looking down the road at generations beyond us who we want to have an equitable opportunity at the way we live. And it's giving us a sense of intentionality in how we get there.
Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think that, I don't think all the commissioners have been through the training from Soraya's office. I think that when you go through the training, this will provide a very good basis for you, and then maybe come back to the table then, because I think this is a good framework.
So I appreciate what everybody's had to say, and this is, this is our ongoing conversation, and it underlies everything, it ought to underlie everything that we talk about otherwise. And it's funny, I was at a conference this past weekend with some other mayors, and most of this was the Saturday morning topic was basically how to introduce equity into your city's conversation. Now, most of the cities that were there were a little smaller than Gainesville, some significantly smaller. You would not believe how much farther along the road we are in having the conversations and in thinking about this than this broad cross-section of other cities from across America. Cities that you would think were already on board. Had not thought about it. And it's not that they're doing everything wrong, or that we're doing everything right, but we at least are having the conversations and trying to get somewhere good. The fact that we have for 30 years, 20 years, 25 years, had an equity director as a charter officer, stunning to other cities. I mean, many of them have an equity officer, but they're 3 or 4 levels down the chart. Which is not to say that we're doing everything right or that we are done. We are absolutely not. I don't want anybody to hear me saying that. But it's really great to be in a place where we're doing this as a part of everything we do, that it's not uncommon for us to have a conversation where the word equity is in the title, even though that probably is raising hairs on the backs of necks in Tallahassee right now. But we will continue to do that. Part of this process really is about avoiding unintended consequences. I think probably 30, 40, 50 years ago, folks around a similar table to this thought they were making good choices. And inevitably, some of the choices we make 30, 40, 50 years from now, people are going to look back and say, what in the world were they thinking? But this is an opportunity for us to avoid some of that, to really be thinking, how are we involving the whole community in all the decisions we make? Because it's about sustainable development. It's about, how we change land use and zoning. It's about where we put a grid network and how that grid network works. It's where do we have stormwater resources, et cetera, et cetera. It's where do we put parks. It's all those things. It's how do we police the community. It's every bit of that. Every decision we make really does affect equity in the long run. I think some of the things that brought this very specifically forward to you, and I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, a lot of us, what we're talking about is Fifth Avenue. And you look back toward the chain of events that created that, everybody at the time, not everybody, most of the decision makers, many of whom were not involved with the city of Gainesville, but they were consistently thinking that they were doing the next right thing. But they didn't have a process for saying, wait a second, is this really smart to use some land to build affordable housing on that a few years later gets bulldozed and then sits vacant and displaces people multiple times throughout the process, leading us to where we are with it today. And still, by the way, a conversation that isn't happening yet, as far as I know, there's still a pot of money from that that's sitting out there waiting to be used for affordable housing. And that's not to throw anybody under the bus, but it's still a real thing. It still exists. And isn't turned back into places for people to live yet. And I'm going far afield from it, but I think it does bring it back to this is where the conversation started, I think, for you, in a very city-specific kind of way. And it's emblematic of why we need a framework and why we need to make sure that is a systematic approach so that we don't get ourselves in trouble with what seems today like a great decision. You know, something comes in front of us and we say, that sounds great, let's do that. If we have a system to put it through, if we can strain out the bad ideas and make ourselves take a multi-generational look at it, we're less likely to make those errors that don't become obvious errors till a generation or two later. So thank you for bringing it forward, and thanks everybody for your input on it. I think we are headed in a good place with it. I think Mr. Folston's office getting us all oriented to where that effort is headed, and then to being very specific about how the rubber meets the road for all our activities moving forward is very important. I want to speak to data governance also. That's a topic that has come up multiple times over the last 5.5 years, and it would be really great if we could get to a place where we actually did pass a policy on data governance. When we stop and think about it, we have an enormous amount of data that flows through city government, both general government, but specifically GRU. I mean, the amount of data and how it's categorized and how it's labeled and who it's available to and how we might want or not want it to be available, and how the people who, it's the people's data, it's theirs, and how it gets processed and then distributed is something that it's easy to not think about, but we have to think about it. We have to have a policy, and it's going to be really hard to get our arms all the way around it, but it's a very real thing. And it could, having the conversations about how we dispose of it is very much an equity issue. Because you can use data for very good things, or you can use data for very bad things. And we need a policy about how that works. And we've played around with that policy for a solid 5 years. And I think it is time that we find a way to bring that back forward. I've rambled a lot, but there's a lot of talking to do about this. And we're going to have a lot more conversations about it. So let's hear from the public. I think we've done a round. I don't know if there's anybody here to speak on this. You're welcome to if you'd like to.
Come on up, Forrest, come on.
You're part of the public.
Thank you all, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I don't think that I've had my name used so many times without actually speaking. And then also, I mean, so much talk about planning without me getting asked to come up and talk, which I really appreciate. As a planning nerd, this makes me very, very happy. I do want to give a huge thanks to Morgan, who I think did a really, really good job of talking about, of course, the Imagine GNV and then how this can fit into it. I don't know that I could have done a more effective laying out the base of it. I did just want to say that equity, yes, of course, is the driving factor of our reworking of the comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan is intended by nature to be holistic for everything that the city does, and it carries the weight and force of law. So that really is where everything starts. All other plans, all other sort of progress, processes, things like that really are supposed to be stemming from the comprehensive plan. Where I think, in my humble planning nerd opinion, this fits in really, really well is in the innovative movements through planning right now, which is to incorporate goals, metrics, data, and decision-making frameworks all at the same time. Comprehensive plans have been around for a long time, but actually tying goals and metrics to them is relatively new. and that is very innovative, and that's something that Imagine GNV is doing. Of course, incorporating equity is very, very new, and that is what Imagine GNV is doing. Equitable development frameworks are extremely new, and how those as innovative processes work into planning is very new and is very, very exciting. These are not mutually exclusive. These all can work together. And so now if we are able, and I believe that we can, put together a comprehensive plan that includes metrics and goals, includes that strong data background, and has a decision-making framework that is based on equity going forward, that is the most innovative thing that we can do as a city, and that is what we would want to do as staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we recorded that.
Thank you,
Forrest, one last thing. Sorry, and that was such a good note to end on. That I feel bad that I'm taking this, but I did say I wanted to come back around to talk about one thing in particular as it relates to data and ways we can go forward. That kind of tying it back into the development side of this. One thing that strikes me is that we're constantly making decisions about developments that are coming through, what the mix of certain things within those developments are. I try to keep abreast of the data that I can find around as to where we're seeing rent increases going on, what kind of housing units we're getting in, where the most need is. Would it be possible, we obviously need internal data, but a lot of the housing data, retail data is kind of public data. Is it possible, and I guess it would be the will of the commission, to kind of look at, come back to the commission with kind of regular updates as to, where vacancy rates are highest, where we see the biggest supply shortages in terms of types of units that are needed. I know for me that really informs my decision making as to what kind of developments I'm looking at, approving, what I'm willing to hold out more on. I saw in Seattle they have something called a displacement risk index. I know creating indexes is but like where are we seeing a lot of movement occur, and are those in low income neighborhoods? Where are we seeing housing prices go up that would be normally an opportunity zone that we would want to have more affordable housing, but that housing is just being completely out of reach? I know that's a big ask, but we have, having regular updates on this, I know I would certainly be helpful to me, and I think would be helpful to other folks as we're kind of making these big decisions on land use changes.
We're able to pull data, and a lot of data. A sort of caveat to that, of course, a lot of data that we have or has been collected so far does not have an equity focus. So in some cases, we have to pull data from multiple sources that did not have that as a focus. But we absolutely can pull this data. We can pull lots of data that tells that story. And in fact, as a part of the comprehensive plan, and establishing the comprehensive plan and having the state recognize our comprehensive plan, it has to be underlain by data. And so that data collection is a part of the comprehensive plan and starts it off.
I don't know if the commission would feel at all about having them, I would say a quarterly basis or just like a regular basis where they're just talking about what new developments are going in, where rent increases are going up, where housing prices are going up, just kind of broadly our kind of development data and housing data that we have access to that may be useful in how we move forward.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, I believe it was Commissioner Duncan Walker at the joint city-county meeting, we're going to add a housing update quarterly as we're doing updates for GCRA and PCRA Los Angeles places. We're going to add and update the housing. We can include those kinds of development indicators in that housing update.
Sounds
if
great.
That's okay.
Yeah, perfect. If I may, I'm sorry, was there someone else who wanted to go before I made a quick statement? But there's also to your point, Commissioner. Later on down the line, if this is something that is the will of the commission for us to push forward, there is even more work for you.
We're not afraid of work.
I know it. But I had talked previously to Andrew about the idea of a map that would give us the opportunity to visualize, so getting the data back is, of course, is wonderful, and it's a quick fix. It's an easy way and quick way for us to get it now. But I think for us and also for the citizens of Gainesville, for our neighbors to be able to see on a map where these places are, where these opportunities are. Thank you, Forrest, for mentioning, or maybe it was you, Commissioner Eastman, who mentioned the the displacement risk index. There's also an access to opportunity index. So, as we build this thing out, the opportunity for us to really not just do great work, but for us to be able to measure it and for our neighbors to be able to see where in our city all of this stuff is going on, I think is tremendous. It's being done in certain places. There are equitable development maps that exist, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think, it's something that we could, when we get our data, absolutely do.
Commissioner Willis?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a degree in geography. I love maps. I think what Forrest didn't, when we talk about data, what gets missed in this is that a whole bunch of this is geographic information systems that, of course, they know how to manipulate. And we have some of it publicly available, but the average person in the public doesn't quite know. But yeah, the visualization and to tell the story, I know that I like to see a map. I like to see the data. I want layers of it, and I really appreciate it. But even the public, they like it, and I may be giving them not enough credit about their ability to kind of piece it together, to do layers, whether it's the development or the displacement index is a whole lot of data pieces, but in the end you spit something out that you can map, you really can, and people can get a better sense of their city and their place in it. And so when we look at maps when we make decisions, but the potential, I'm going to brag on the field of geography, the potential for it to be able to communicate is so great, and then geographers consistently have trouble communicating it because they're so stuck in the data, but it is such a good communication tool, a map, and that's all a map is communication of data visually, which I think some people forget that's what a map is, but just to let you know, I am all about the maps. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, man.
So I love where this is going because we have been talking with communications about developing starting with simple dashboards. I mean, just data that we already get and gets processed by this commission without us even knowing it sometimes. This is exactly the kind of thing that can go there. I mean, honestly, what I was simply visualizing with things like housing is how many housing starts did we have in the last quarter? How many permits? How many simple data that we have because we generate it. I mean, nobody gives housing permits in the city of Gainesville except the city of Gainesville, so we have that. Things like that, but we can certainly, as time goes on, layer more levels of complication with that and have a jumping off place for our community and for other communities to look at and use our data. We have an enormous amount of data. How we contextualize that for folks and bring it down to the most basic level and some leaping off points from there is where I want us to get with this, which helps us do better from an equity framework. And I will tell you too that I've been talking to some other cities that I want to eventually bring into the contextualization in our dashboard process, as well as other things. We have had, and this is way off topic, but it matters in what I'm talking about here. We have a hard time finding peer cities, or we've seemed to have had a hard time finding peer cities. We have often said, well, this great big city over here does these things. Well, they have resources we don't have. And, or this tiny city isn't up to where we are, but we have resources they don't have. Or this other city in Florida that has about the same number of people is doing things differently. Well, there's so much not like Clearwater, for instance, has about the same number of people. Clearwater and Gainesville ain't the same thing at all. Cities that kind of are the same thing and are very similar to each other: Athens, Georgia; Columbia, South Carolina; Columbia, Missouri; Knoxville, Tennessee; and Tallahassee, Florida. They're all about the same size. They have similar, not exactly, but similar demographics, and they're all similar industries, big college towns. So and they're all in the South. So they have a lot of the same contextualization that we do. I want to share our information with them and share their information with us so we can see how we're doing based on other cities that are kind of like us, which doesn't mean we shouldn't aspire to other bigger cities, but how are we doing compared to other cities that are like us, I think is important, so that we know how we're doing. And so that we don't get caught up in that classic Gainesville thing of no matter how good the numbers are, they're awful. Because, no, we're not doing well enough. We gotta learn to celebrate when we do things well. And I think that's one of the ways that we're able to do that, is how do we compare to other cities that are kind of like us. And I'll promise you, none of those cities are having the conversation that we are to this level right now. So, thank you all for this. And thank you also, before we move on to the next thing, for bearing with me on making sure that I see who's next and calling. Yeah, I try to keep a list because I couldn't do it otherwise. I don't know how Lauren did it without writing it down, but it's easier with the lights upstairs, I'll tell you that. But without the lights, I thank you as I learned through this process. I really appreciate everybody taking a moment and having this incredibly thoughtful conversation as we move forward. So, do we need to take a specific action on this?
I just want to, unless there's general consensus, I heard a few things, that may have been said now, but I do want to, I guess, put the motion on the floor just so we can make sure that it is official, that we are moving forward with a framework or allowing staff to bring us back what an equitable development framework would be. Listening to the comments that have been made by,
I'm looking at, so right.
I see you.
Yeah.
Well, I thought looking at Morgan, because what step are we, some of this was brought through Morgan, so I can't remember what.
Stuff is pitched to
I would
staff.
work with whoever is
Yeah, whoever, yeah. Okay, so I think it is Office of Equity, it is Forest, it is, everybody that comes to the table. Right,
Staff.
it's staff, period, that comes to the table to creatively, take a look at the framework. We've talked about a lot of things today, a lot. And I do want to give staff a little bit of discretion there, particularly listening to what we said and give you some, creative license as well, to bring us something back that we can have a future discussion about in the way of an equitable development framework.
So, yeah, is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Because I want to make sure the clerk's office can accurately.
I move in front of all of that.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We already had public comment, kind of. We had the opportunity for public comment. We had staff comment.
We did. Thank you, Forrest.
All right, yes. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have that passing unanimously
Thank you,
once
colleagues.
again. And by the way, I think what we just did and what we've done the last couple of items is exactly what general policy is originally designed to do, is have these deep, thoughtful conversations around the table and really be able to hopefully get us somewhere that drives better policy. So, thank you for that. All right, Madam Clerk.
The next item is item number 2023-14, GPC Administrative Session, with a recommendation that the committee set its agenda for the second quarter of FY23 and approve the 2023 commission calendar, recess dates, and town hall dates.
Okay, so we have already, and obviously we're at the 26th, we've got those items. Moving forward, the 9th, the 23rd, March 9th, and March 23rd. We'll need a motion by Commissioner Chestnut.
I move that I want to make some recommendations
Sure.
on this. So before we get a motion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, okay. All right. I was hoping that we were going to move towards one GPC meeting per month. So I'm looking at, are there things that we can combine that would take us to that? Maybe not this session, but perhaps the next. But I was looking at trying to streamline GPC to once a month because we've got committee meetings as well that are going to be occurring. Just my thought, because it's between the committees, GPC, and commission, it's a lot that
It
we're
is.
asking of staff. And that's one thing. Two, I don't know if we have combined our recess dates, particularly spring break, with the school board, Santa Fe, University of Florida, all together before, but this is great. I'm glad to see that happen.
Yeah.
And hope that we will maintain that in the future, because it works well for families. And that's that, but
Okay. All right, so other conversation about that? I like the idea, by the way, of let's try next quarter, one a month, and see how that works.
see how that works.
So who's,
Then I'll put a motion on the floor.
well, let's go around one time and then just Commissioner
Okay.
Buck.
So Commissioner Chestnut's right, so there is some spring breaks have aligned. This is a first
This
in the
is.
last several years where they happen to align, so that's a good thing, so that's fortunate for us, although there may be another meeting that could come out of here, and it's probably the March 23rd. But that's something that can come up in a motion. And then I'm in favor of any streamlining because we have also added a public safety committee meeting with their people in it. It appears that our committee structure is that we all are roughly assigned to 3 different organizations, committee, one internal, one external, and something that's quasi something in between. And I think that's appropriate. So I like the fact that you assigned us and that we got, and the clerk helped putting us in various different boxes
Right.
to report back. But I think that'll also line up with potentially meeting less in the GPC and reporting back that effort at the GPC. What did that committee have?
Okay, very good. Commissioner Willetts, you?
Yeah. I just, one of the questions was, it wasn't specific GPC, but this whole meeting calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I thought that was a recess week, the last week of March, and I know that the town hall date, your town hall is scheduled last March. But that was not a recess week, that was just a new meeting. Okay.
Mr. Saka?
Fifth Thursdays are fun, completely throws you off. So as far as moving to only one GPC a month, I think you just said like GPC, the last couple have been a good example of what we can get done. I don't think we can have as many of those conversations in just 1 month if we try to cram them into the same 4 or 5 hour once a month. And on the other hand, the previous commission approved a raise so that we would be here full-time. So I understand it's a lot of meetings, but if we're trying to say this is a full-time job, we should be here full-time, and sometimes that includes meetings. And I don't think the committee meetings are a burden. I think it's a nice deviation from the Thursday agenda. And coming into this building, reviewing materials, meeting is the job at its base. I don't think 4 static meetings in a month, it's not even that according to our break schedule, is not too much to ask given the conversation of last week and salary and expectations of the job. So I think we should keep it as is. I think having multiple opportunities to discuss policy at a whole level is an opportunity we shouldn't put aside if we want to give topics the attention and time without saying, well, we have 6 topics, so everybody gets 30, 40 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Chestnut, you want to make a motion?
Thank you. I move that we adopt the General Policy Committee Administrative Calendar with the thought of streamlining the process and looking at a trial date of one GPC meeting a month beginning in March, when this one is completed.
So beginning in April then?
In April.
Yeah.
I second that.
Could you split that?
Sure, let's split the votes on those two. Yeah.
The secondary vote.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, this is administrative, but if there's anybody from the public, I'm okay hearing from you. So I would remind commissioners that the reason we, and the public as well, that the reason we have recesses is less about giving commissioners time off than it is to give staff time to try to catch up to all the stuff that we put on our plates. Because Lord knows, we all have great ideas, but they all require work, so. Okay, so first we'll vote on the calendar of agenda items for the remainder of this quarter. Is there any questions about that?
Yeah, well, I'm just curious about the structure of this. So if we have things that we want, this is the finalized one, like we have on February 23rd, just one item that is on there. So if we have things that we want on there at this point, is when we would request to put them on, or does it come up?
Yeah, this is a great idea to put something else on there. Now, it's not like this is going to be built in concrete. You know, what if something comes up, if we have some opportunity available, we often move things around, but this is the framework, basically, to work from, so that we know what's going to be coming forward and where there are some light moments that might benefit from a different agenda item adding in.
Okay.
Would the fire assessment require 3 hours? Could we not consolidate some other things on that date, on that February 23rd date?
It'll be a pretty lengthy conversation, but I'm not saying that it would take up that full long.
Yeah.
So we might be able to move some things around, but also, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does this commission. We will end up putting things there.
I know, that's why it's best.
Yeah. So if y'all want to move some things around, that's okay. You know, maybe move something off of the 9th onto the 23rd.
Or the 23rd, move the right to renew and early leasing restrictions up to the 23rd.
If staff
Is it ready?
needs
Yeah.
time with legal to keep researching some of it, so it's mostly finished, but we wanted to put it on the calendar ahead of time.
Okay. Well, I just am looking at where we can add or take the best advantage of time. And anyway,
So the other thing that some of these meetings afford an opportunity for is sometimes we need to make decisions in between commission meetings, and this is an opportunity to do that as a body as well. So sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a little lighter load on that. And Commissioner Book, were you going to second?
I don't recall what the 3 topics are, but we have put 3 workshop topics on the calendar at the moment. And I'm mindful of the fact that we want to make sure we give sufficient time for weighty topics and discussion and public input. But if it may be worthwhile to look and see, do any of those 3 align themselves with one of these? Potentially at February 23rd, and you take something off and take the least time-consuming one, and we plug it in right there. And then you've still streamlined something and covered completely all the things that you have.
Madam Clerk, did you want to add something there?
Absolutely. Michelle Gandy, City Clerk. I just want to mention, this is still a schedule at any time if we get to up to one of these dates. Agenda management still happens every 2 weeks, in addition to the ability to cancel a meeting if we see that we don't have enough items. So essentially, this is a placeholder with the exception of the schedule for the administrative session. Typically, during these sessions, we try to give staff a heads up for the items that you want to hear at these particular dates. So if there are additional items that you have coming through the research queue that are not already calendared, that is an opportunity to kind of look at some of the times that there are lighter dates and schedule them. And I think that's it. I think that addresses.
Madam Clerk, do you remember what the 3 workshop topics are that we've placed on the calendar?
So let me just also mention, I was actually up there consolidating GRU and general government's budget calendars. There's about 12 meetings that will be on top of these meetings from now until September. May is a heavy month, but that kind of goes beyond this first quarter here. There is, I believe, something on Imagine GNV. There's a workshop for that. There is a workshop or a special meeting with the Gainesville Housing Authority. Those are the 2 that pop out. I know there is one more that I just don't remember from the top of my head, but.
We had a couple of other things that we had asked for was a,
Job Corps?
well, but Job Corps we can put on the March 2nd agenda. Power district. We talked about having a meeting to really get deep on power district, and that's going to require special thinking on power district. I promise you, we don't want to drop the ball on that one.
Nope.
And a training which is coming up in February on just land use and zoning. Those are the things that pop into my head on those. Madam Clerk, anything else? All right.
So I have a policy report that's already done that's kind of setting minimum standards for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that I wanted to have at some point on the GPC. And then we talked about just talking more broadly about how other ways of addressing housing supply issues that are unrelated to attaching more units together in single-family zones. I don't know if we have space for those on any of these upcoming agendas.
23rd?
So why don't you bring it on the 23rd?
Yeah.
Works for me.
All right, so that's,
Do you want both of them there?
Both, yeah.
You're gonna have to think a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think a lot. Yeah, the bicycle one, that's an easy one. I mean, and then I'd like to bring up the housing supply stuff before we get everything back from the plan board on what we're currently doing. I might be a little optimistic there, but sure, I mean, if we can fit it on the February 23rd, we can. But those would be two. Well, that would be a larger
Well,
discussion.
you might want to bring that issue before the 23rd. It could probably come here on the 9th. This is,
Do you think we could fit, there's notice for rent increase and lease terminations, which will be, in wild spaces, public places will be a meaty discussion, and community input procedure discussion.
wild spaces will take us a long time. It
Yeah,
always
that
does.
will.
Yeah.
that will. The Duke Energy donation, does that need to be a GPC, or wouldn't that come directly to the commission?
I'm not sure what that even
I
is.
think that's the Brian side.
It's a donation, they're going to fund the Juneteenth Freedom Fest.
Zariah Foster, Director of Office at Conclusion. That's going to be really fast. Duke Energy is coming to make a contribution for our Juneteenth efforts for an event, so they're just coming to give us a check.
So that should be on a commission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't we have them?
They wasn't available any of those other dates, the two entities from Duke to come. That was the date that was available.
That said, it shouldn't take more than 20 minutes.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. They're coming to give us a check.
That can stay on there, we'll just.
Yeah, and take a picture.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Cute that they got it.
I think I'd be fine at the March 23rd meeting in particular, it would be fine for.
March 23rd?
Yeah, that way I can give planning some time to review that.
So both bicycle and,
No, I was saying
bicycle,
one
the
earlier.
February
Bicycle
23rd.
can fit on the 9th then, if that one, if the Duke item is.
be careful of that, so some of these are gonna be.
I know, but Brian
So
said the
February
bicycle was easy.
23rd, I think
Yeah, you
it's
should
the
just pass it,
bicycle.
I don't see why anyone disagree.
February 23rd, the
Bicycle.
bike ped update from research that Brian's asked for, Commissioner Eastman's asked for. And the 23rd would be, how would you describe that one? Or
Just
March 23rd?
Just housing supply policies that came up in,
And is that a research report also, or is it?
it was just something that's Commissioner
You'll
Justin
provide
and
the
I
backup.
mentioned. Sure, I will work with the planning department. You said March 23rd you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have asked for research on that. I have not formalized my request yet. That's something I'm learning how to do.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that earlier this week, but I have not formalized our policy.
We have so much data on this. I mean, HRNA came out with it, the Schimberg Center, or not Schimberg, Florida Housing Coalition has backup on it. I mean, this is, as we discussed at the meeting when we changed our zoning, this has been like the most discussed issue in our, like in recent years of our city. So I think there's probably, like, if maybe our Office of Sustainable Development could put it into, kind of bite-sized chunks and do a report on, do a presentation on it, but I don't know if it's necessary to do a whole policy presentation.
So let me ask you this, we're going to do a discussion on housing at the 10 o'clock session of a regular meeting, and I forget what date we had targeted for that. Okay, would it fit there?
Probably. Yep.
Let's just do it then, yeah. But so it doesn't need to go on a GPC agenda, it can go in that 10 o'clock deep dive update section when we do housing. Okay. All right, so we we have a motion on the table for this as we've amended it. Any other questions
Right.
about that?
Which includes administrative session and the commission recess dates.
Right, but that'll
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
we'll vote separately on
Okay.
that. Okay. All in favor of this first part?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so this, with the additions, passes unanimously. And the commission meeting calendar, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously. All right. Okay. We have space for, I just said this.
I believe part of the second half of Commissioner Chestnut's motion was to do a pilot quarter with only one GPC a month, starting in April.
You're correct.
That's why I asked those.
Okay. So ignore that. All in favor of a commission meeting calendar that includes one GPC from April forward per month? Is that accurately described? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So that's 4-3, okay.
I had a question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Was this a pilot? Are you just trying to pilot this to see if it works?
Yeah, I want to see
Okay.
if it works, but
Okay.
looking at it.
We can always roll
Yeah,
back.
you can go back,
Okay.
but
I was
it's
just trying to-
not permanent.
I was just trying to get some clarity as to what you said. I wasn't clear on the motion. Okay, I got it.
All right, so that, the motion passes 4-3.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Our next item is public comment, and we have Ms. Zara out here. Ms. Zara?
Okay, thank you for being with us all afternoon. I would remind you and anybody else that the lights are your friend. As long as it's green, you have plenty of time. When you get to yellow, it's time to wind down, and red means we have to stop. Okay, thank you.
My name is Zara Biasnajad. I've been here a few times. Some of you know me, but there are a few new faces. I'm surprised there are not much public people coming because what I'm going through is very big issue that I never see in you guys' agenda. And it's just very disturbing. As a mother, I'm angry. I'm angry of God, city, government, police department, City of Gainesville. My son been murdered, 3 people involved. The way everybody handled it is just, no one wants to go through that. The way I've been treated after his murder, none of you wants to go through that. I don't know why you guys did to me. The way police charge these criminals, the way dispatch act, the way medical examiner did their job. How can be all these mistakes in one city, one place? The shooter got only 10 years, the other 2 walking free. They were making fun of him, he's Muslim Christian. He was only a year and a half when we get out of country, my birth country, Iran. Okay? My family thinks there is law here. There was no law for me. Okay? He got shot from the back, very cowardly, and he was walking away. I'm proud of him. He said, "You have nothing for me." He was walking. They ran over him with the car. They came back, fought with him, and he was the one who helping these people, taking him to the doctor, taking him, getting medicine. I could not open my mouth, say these people are doing this or these people are doing, as a mother who sees what's wrong, what's right. He would not let me because he didn't want none of them be disrespected. That kind of person he was. I'm proud of him. He's happy, he's died. Okay, he won't feel it no more. What about me? Took 3 years, the court finished, July 2022. That I start finding out what's happened. I keep telling them, no one called 911, what kind of place is that? I hear gunshot being called all the time. Every gunshot needs to be taken seriously. This is one issue. I'm not alone. I'm wondering why no one comes and discusses. If you don't discuss, if you don't know the problem, you cannot fix it. You have to know. Media being stop letting people know. I'm angry, but I'm humble. I have goals, my goals to get justice for my son. I might drop dead. 2 days ago, almost feeling that I'm dying because I have heart issue. The distress they cause for me.
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask
Thank
you
you.
to.
I appreciate it. But this is big issue. Took me 3 years to find out, and I had to explain in 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate it, and I
There
cannot
is-
imagine
there is
what,
agenda.
ma'am, we're gonna have to ask you to stop. I can't imagine what you must be going through. I will tell you that we can't make the courts do anything. The courts don't work for us. You are more than welcome to come talk about this again and to continue to do that, but we can't fix the courts. That they don't work for us.
Yeah, when the roots is dry,
Ma'am, thank you. I appreciate you being
it
here
has to
talking with
be on
us.
your agenda to fix the
Ma'am,
problem. It's crime.
We cannot, the courts don't work for us. The courts don't work for us.
Yeah, it's all about money, not like.
No, ma'am, no, it's that they don't.
I
work for us.
understand.
Okay, I'm gonna have to ask you to
I appreciate
do
it
that.
for a
Thank you.
bit of time with you.
Member comment? Commissioner Chestnut?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor. A few months ago, Commissioner Duncan Walker brought up an issue that I think we need to come back to, and that is Commissioner Book has been talking about civility in terms of our citizens. We need to come back to civility in terms of this commission and ourselves. And I'm not sure where you want it to go with it, but I think we need to discuss that because each commissioner has a right to express himself or herself, and they should be heard. We may not want to take the time to agenda whatever it is or look at workshopping what they're trying to present, but they have the right to bring that up. And I'm just concerned that the civility is getting out of hand. That's one. Two, we have no process, no procedure for when a commissioner takes time off, an extended amount of time. That must be addressed as well. So I just want to bring it up to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So on the first part,
I received calls yesterday for the way that Commissioner Book was spoken to during agenda review. I was not present, but I got several calls last evening.
okay.
Commissioner Book has the right to request civility for the people that we represent.
Absolutely.
I'm asking civility for among ourselves.
I certainly don't disagree with that. Happy to revisit that situation, which resulted and had already been planned and resulted in an item that's on the February 9th agenda. I'm not sure what I could have done differently that would not have been outside our normal practices. If we want to talk about changing the practices of how we agenda things, then that's a separate conversation I'm happy to have as well.
I wasn't at the meeting. The public felt that he was spoken to, not by you. He was spoken to in a very rude manner. And I'm asking for civility among ourselves. I'm not talking about the process. I'm not talking about the agenda. I'm talking about how we speak to each other.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Book, is it on that?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back, if that's okay. Yeah.
Did you want to go, Mayor?
No, please, Mr. Book.
So that almost kind of generates the fact that I kind of have to speak to that. I think when you talk about the manner in which you interact with somebody, What's important to know is the only person who could be, you know, they use the term bullying, for example, would be if I felt bullied. And so I have pretty thick skin, and so this is good because that's what you need when you're operating at any long table, whether it's round or the one that's upstairs. And so I'm very appreciative of you bringing that up, Commissioner. But I think really the manner in which we move forward, at least for that piece, the manner in which we treat each other, is about role modeling and speaking to each other well, and you know, looking at each other in the eyes and agreeing to disagree, but doing it professionally. And I know I can do that, and I think that the 7 of us are capable of doing that. So I'm very appreciative that people called. I mean, my phone blows up too when, you know, when there's various things of conflict. I can't speak to what, I know Mayor Pro Tem, you were dealing with something beforehand, so I'll let you handle that part. But as far as yesterday, what I would say is, in agenda review, we're just talking about agenda items. Those are not the big picture. That's just how we do an agenda. And so I think if we recognize that fact and go, all we're really talking about is when we're putting something on, we're not talking about exclusionary zoning or equity, big things that impact our city. That's when we should be having really healthy disagreement, not merely on where an item goes or what's the order. And I think that's probably where we lost it a little bit yesterday. It was just agenda review. So it's okay for us to disagree a little bit on agenda review. And, but I'm very appreciative, like I said, and so pass it along to them. I'm appreciative to the people who may have spoken up on behalf of it. And probably the easiest informal way to say is I'm a big boy, and I can handle those pieces. And role modeling, no matter what happens, when we're kind of being collegial and looking at each other and speaking to each other, probably goes a long way. And hopefully 1 year from now, not 3 weeks into our new tenure, Commissioner Willits and Commissioner Eastman, we're 3 weeks in. And maybe in 1 year in, we'll be a very different looking body in the manner in which we're interacting with both the citizens up here, but also at the table and with each other. And that's kind of always a work in progress, I think. So, and we'll hear more about it as some concrete things that we've just kind of approved on an agenda for the GPC. Okay, it's not exactly where I want it on the agenda, but I can handle that. But thank you very much.
Commissioner Sacco, and then we'll get back to the
Thank you,
next
Mr.
item.
Mayor. I agree. What we say as commissioners matters, which is why I took great offense to saying some of our black officers need remedial classes in PowerPoint. And that was made a joke, that a public servant with decades of experience needs remedial classes. And that some of our female employees, well, their job is just making a few phone calls, things will be ready. And I took great offense to trying to push through despite process.
Was this on the agenda yesterday?
Yes, it was. So I took great offense to our staff being spoken about in a matter that is not befitting. Saying this will be ready, I insist it gets put on, I insist it gets put on, despite many people explaining why it can't be put on, and then saying I'm sure it'll be a matter of a few phone calls. Describing someone's job as making a few phone calls is a horrible understatement of the value of that person and that employee. So, did I lose my temper? Possibly. But it's only in defense of our staff that has dedicated years and decades to be spoken of in so flippant a manner.
Then I'm glad I brought it up. Now, the citizens did not raise that point about the black officers, the remediation. None of that was heard. Part that was heard was the manner in which he was spoken to. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. We've covered that. Commissioner Neckenbach.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor. We deal with such heavy topics, and I want to say thank you to you, my colleagues, who brought forward an issue at the joint city-county meeting that drew our attention to the need to recognize pedestrian safety as a crisis. That's critical. It's crucial. I was wanting to dovetail on that day, but did not, by bringing forward the issue of gun violence. and recognizing that as a crisis, potentially coming back to the mayor and asking that we declare a state of emergency. It was interesting when I saw Ms. Zara here today, because when I got to the city, I called Omi and I asked her to agenda on next Thursday a conversation about gun violence and us declaring a state of emergency and what that means. Several months ago, I had a town hall. It was a hybrid town hall. It was part telephone, it was part in person. And 1,100 people showed up on the phones, in the chamber. And it wasn't because Commissioner Duncan Walker is so great. It was because the issue is mammoth and cross-cutting, and that it is baffling experts, hurting families, challenging police departments and community organizations all over this country as to how to wrap their arms around it. Some of the stats that I gave back then, I won't quote now because I don't have that information in my hand. But what we do know is the issue is not getting any better. Our police department is doing what they can. The title of my town hall then was Gun Violence, a Community Response, because it's going to take all hands on deck. And one of the reasons that I didn't dovetail and say, yes, let's also add gun violence to the need to recognize crisis was because you all had it so nicely laid out. You've been doing work and research on that for a long time. You could attach things to it. The gun violence issue needs, in my mind, probably a level of community input so that we can attach something to it. What do I mean when I say that? The governor of New York declared a state of emergency in the entire state on gun violence. And what was attached to it was X amount of dollars that will go towards the creation of jobs for young people. Something very similar in cities, the mayors in different cities are doing. And so I want us to have a very intentional conversation at the next meeting as to what we think we can do. We won't have the answer. We won't have it. But my prayer is that we'll be able to contribute. What I can envision is us equipping community, giving them agency to continue some work that a lot of them have already begun, but also to empower community and families to play a role. I have a couple of ideas. I won't belabor this point, but I did want to put it on our radar that I asked for that to be agended earlier today, Ms. Zara. Every time I see you, two things happen in my heart. It smiles, but it also cries with you. I want you to hear from this commission, and I think I speak for us all, that you are seen, you are heard, and I believe that we are going to do everything that we can to try to address a huge problem. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience. It's going to take that. But I think we're all willing to jump in and try to put some pieces together.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan Walker. I'm going to get to call on you in a second, but sometimes timing moves all of us in ways that, Providence moves all of us in ways that we don't recognize as happening at the same time. You all heard at the swearing in me say we're not going to be blind to gun violence or pedestrian deaths or homelessness. And following on that, I had conversations this week with Charlie Lane at UF and with Paul Brody at Santa Fe, and I've had some earlier conversations with the manager and with Chief Scott about what we can do to bring all the resources available. And that is not to the exclusion by any means of the community, but to bring the resources that we can to the table on this very issue. I agree with you, and I like the idea of saying, I might change the wording a little to the crisis, gun violence crisis, emergency, and I want to make sure that we don't get in trouble with it from a legal perspective of using a word that might have a different, a specific meaning. At any rate, Santa Fe is, President Brody, speaking on behalf of his institution, is very interested in being a part of that solution. And he and I spoke about how Santa Fe might be able to bring other folks to the table in a little bit different way than just the city can do, and how they might be able to empower some job training ideas as well as some education ideas that are a little beyond our lane. The University of Florida, again, speaking on behalf of the institution, Dr. Lane was interested in how they might bring a more specific and very intentional research angle to from the University of Florida to the problem. I talked with the manager and with Chief Scott about how we might bring other law enforcement agencies to talk about the fact that this doesn't end at city limits, that we're dealing with forces that don't respect what we do and don't respect the city limits. So bringing other law enforcement agencies from a regional perspective, as well as a national perspective, to the conversation, to have them talk with each other specifically and with us as elected leaders and with other elected leaders about how we can approach this administratively. But at the core of it are the neighbors and the neighborhoods who bear the burden on a consistent basis. So I look forward to having a broader discussion. Happy to do it next Thursday. I think that's entirely appropriate. But I wanted you to know and everybody to be aware that we have started marshaling the other resources in this community, the institutional resources that are substantial.
Oh, yes.
But that have not gone into action to this point. I'm hopeful that over the coming months, we can bring those institutional resources to action in a way that can work with our neighbors and hear our neighbors and make change in this community. It's one of the things I absolutely want to count on dashboards. We need to know, how many people do we lose to gun violence this year compared to last year? How does it compare to other communities? Not as a, hey, look at us in a bad or a good way, but just so it's there and it's staring us in the face. I think that absolutely matters. And we do have at the top of the agenda next Thursday, the 2nd, we have a GPD update. Perhaps this dovetails that. I can follow that as part of the morning session.
Absolutely. I wanted to thank you really quickly. I apologize if I'm jumping in front of anyone, but thank you for bringing up Dr. Brody at the town hall. He was one of the guests, as well as both agencies from the city, the Gainesville Police Department, as well as Alachua County Sheriff's Department. And the thing that was thrilling, I mean, there were chiefs of police from all neighboring townships. I think I said something to a couple, and they came out in droves in response to this issue, not just because it's appropriate for law enforcement to be there, but because they are ready, willing, and chomping at the bit to be a part of the solution. And I get a chill every time I think about it. So thank you for mentioning that. How we respond is going to be critical, but those institutional resources that you mentioned bringing on, I had spoken with Dr. Brody back then about how they could be a part of the solution in terms of providing really what the kids are asking for. Because part of this is conversations with them. and even putting them in the driver's seat to a certain degree. What do you need to keep you safe? What do you need to keep a gun out of your hand? What do you need to reduce the peer pressure and influence that so many of them are facing? Some to just simply survive. And their answer to me was, we need places to go, we need things to do, we need jobs, and we need mentors. That is a quote. That is a quote. And so as we start moving forward in whatever we can legally frame this, whether it is crisis, whether it is emergency, whatever resources we put behind this, my prayer is that it will be in response to what the children have told us that they need. My prayer is that we will center them and their families, bringing them to the table, as we marshal those institutional resources, because part of their response has to be tailored to them. But I'm so grateful. Thank you, all colleagues, for your ears and for whatever work you participate in as we move forward on this very difficult issue.
Commissioner
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Commissioner Duncan Walker. I like to think that things happen when they happen for a reason. So bringing up the issue of gun violence, our friends from GPD in the back, the last 2 shootings I went with, I was with each of them. So every time I've gone out with GPD, a gun has been involved. At one point, a father tried to take a newborn with a gun when he went to the mother's house. Another time, we assumed it was a shooting. It was not, but the way the crowd reacted to a noise caused the stampede. And the last time was an actual shooting, and it took hours to clear out, even as people from the neighborhood came out to just see. And it was a neighborhood we've been at patrolling 2-3 hours prior. The fact that I can't go out with GPD for a few hours without running into a gun is a problem. The fact that you mentioned our children, I think we all know Mr. Bronson Martin. He ran for judge, would have made a great one. He had a project called the Law and Justice program, and it partnered with the law school. It brought kids in for mentorship for a whole kind of day field trip. And one of the times I volunteered with him, the topic was guns. Guns. Let's teach you about the legal ramifications. Let's talk about how you get a gun. And I remember one thing that stands out, crystal clear, it was a core memory was formed that day. The kids can be anywhere from 11 or 12 to 18. And we had a room of about 50 kids. And we said, if right now, if we said, go find a gun, how many of you could get one today? Every single child raised their hand. Children who were 11 raised their hand. So that was 8 years ago at this point, and things have not gotten better. I agree. It is, I would say crisis. I understand the legal statutory definition issue, but it is a crisis. To that end, I was trying to find on our calendar, because I know you, Commissioner Chestnut and I are all on the Public Safety Committee. I was trying to find if we found a date yet for that first meeting where a lot of we have not that I could find going into March. But I would like to propose, if both of you, there is no date that I could find up to March at this point. I was looking, I could have missed it. But if it is amenable with both of you, I would suggest that one of those first topics be that at least part of it be a listening session, an invitation to the community on just those issues, on just gun violence. Like, we don't know where to start often in these subcommittee issues of what we'll do. So we could have ideas. But having the issues come from the public and saying this, and we can find common trends, common issues, and that can really inform our schedule of conversations. And of course, I agree, a full commission meeting is needed at some point, but this might be a good opportunity for the community to come forward in a, I guess, less televised opportunity, but also as a preliminary search for staff. When we see these issues and we have these questions, staff can prepare that information for the larger commission when we have the full discussion. But I want to give, not wait for when that conversation's ready. At that first meeting, have that opportunity, be able to listen to our neighbors. Because I think the last ride-along I did, I tried to talk to people, and everyone wanted to know. Everyone was curious, but didn't want to know anything at the same time, because it is terrifying. But they all had stories. There isn't one person, I think, in this town who doesn't have a story about guns, myself included. So I would like, if you're both amenable to it, at least start the conversation at that first meeting and set aside a portion of that safety committee as a listening session just to, did you find a date?
There is a date, yes,
Oh, okay.
that's what I was trying to tell you.
Is it March?
No.
It's
February.
February
February.
28th.
Okay, I must have missed it.
There's
I was
a
trying
date.
to listen and scroll, it wasn't working. If you
Yes,
don't-
that's
if
fine,
either of
that's
you-
fine.
To make
February
that,
27th is what it is, 8th.
to make that
Yeah.
part of a listening session, just to
I
open the
like-
door.
I like the idea of the listening session, but if I can be so candid, I also, because it's us on the committee, I want to hear from everybody around this table as well, because I think
Oh,
that all of us will probably have some hand in it, whether you are on the Public Safety Committee or not. I love your idea of the listening session. I have, a few months ago, and I promise I'll make this quick, a few months ago, I convened a few listening sessions. I caught an Uber to City Hall one day, and by chance was driven here by a young man who had just gotten out of prison. Wonderful young man, who had been in prison for something that did involve a gun. Had a great conversation here, gave him my card. When I got out of the car, I said, please call me. He called me probably a few days later. He is a student out at Santa Fe, president of several organizations out there doing amazing things. We had several conversations after that one. I asked him if he could find me some more gentlemen just like himself, and there was a reason that I asked for gentlemen up front. Probably about 3 months ago, a group of about 8 gentlemen who have been justice involved, most of them, if not all of them, for crimes involving guns, met in the conference room here. The shortest amount of time around the table was 8 years that had been done in prison. The most amount of time was 20 years. Each one of these young men has come out wanting to be a part of the solution, not the problem. I'm not an expert, but one of the things that my mind and my heart tells me are when the kids aren't listening to parents, and sometimes we know those are not the ones that they listen to first. When we know that they're bucking authority, when we know that they're either not listening in school or not going, sometimes they'll listen to the people who've been there, done that. And I feel like there's probably a two-way street to create a very cathartic experience for a population of individuals who, when they come home from prison, don't come into a situation that is welcoming, don't come back to jobs, don't come, we don't reintegrate them very well at all. But to create a cathartic and meaningful experience for them to come back into their home community and do something good, but also for these young men and young women, because we will not leave them out, but for that group of youth to be able to hear directly from some people who can speak to the experience, who can say, you actually don't want that life. Think, because when you pull that trigger, you change everybody's life. So I love that. Just wanted to kind of dovetail off of that. I believe in listening sessions. Those young men, my goal is to hopefully help them to shape an organization that will grow into something that can really do some powerful work and really prevent these children from being involved at all. Taking us a little bit off the point, I want to do that. I'm a little hesitant, Commissioner, to take it off of the Thursday's meeting.
No, we
I don't
can
think
keep
it's-
it. It was
Okay,
in
good.
a second
Thank
opportunity, a different opportunity,
I love
where
the second opportunity.
rather than
Thank
in
you.
the middle of
As
everything,
far as I'm
it
concerned,
is.
we've already agended it for the second, so.
That's what I asked for, thank you. I thought you were saying
No,
let's talk,
just
okay.
a separate opportunity with, we keep using this as like just lower stakes,
But
like it's a
put
less
some meat on the
stressful.
bones and
Yeah,
start
And
moving
just
forward.
more opportunity to have that conversation.
Absolutely. I like that a lot.
Because we generally don't set the agenda.
If I might just intervene just for a second for us to just be aware of the fact that the One Nation, One Project,
Thank you.
funded by ARPA, has listening sessions, and they're working with community-based organizations and with our faith-based organizations already.
Yeah.
quite frankly, it's a part of a program that this commission approved, and it will be a part of the ARPA update that comes to you in the next couple of weeks or so. But those listening sessions are part of a larger program around the arts that are already in session. $648,000 of ARPA money.
Thank you.
Approved by this commission that is geared towards that whole gun violence theme and young people listening sessions, artistic expression, etc. I know that Chief Dixon, I'm sorry. I know you're going to get me for that. I know I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. Chief Scott. I'm in trouble.
Yes, you are.
Chief, yes, I am. Chief Scott, I know that you've been working a lot with the faith-based organizations, and you've been meeting with Shane Andrews over at the school system. You have some things already in motion. They haven't been shared necessarily with the commission. I know you were going to be doing that with your update, but I just wanted to make sure that you all know that there are things programmatically already in motion. Of course, the listening sessions, the impetus from the commission through the committee will just, make this even more important in terms of its impact. But I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And ultimately, I suggested because that first meeting is very administrative, and we're already gathered, we might as well use it for something good, since we have that time.
So I foresee this agenda item on the 2nd as an opportunity to, I think, probably unanimously declare a gun violence crisis, and then lay out some of the things so that we all understand that are being done and that are being planned, and then we can get into some neighbor work on February 28th.
For sure.
And put a plan together to address what I think we will describe as a crisis. Commissioner Blake, just a second, let me, I need to respond on a couple of things. One guardrail for us. I want to remind everyone that as we discuss the gun violence crisis, that I believe we will name, Florida Statute 790.33 prohibits us from doing anything about one of the words in that phrase. We are not allowed to make any rules or laws or regulations per statute about guns, about firearms, or about ammunition. In 2011, the Florida legislature preempted that. We recently, just in the last few days, heard the Supreme Court decision that affirmed that the legislature has the right to preempt us from most of that. They cannot remove us from office for that reason, which is nice. I was glad to see at least some of that.
At this time.
Right. For that reason, let's say. But I always, I don't want to miss the opportunity ever to remind us that that bit of governance has been preempted away from us, and every other municipality in Florida. Didn't want to miss the opportunity also to talk about Mayors for Guaranteed Income. Our project that my predecessor had approved and been working with was very specifically to guarantee an income, I want to say for 18 months, for a set of folks who met some guidelines coming out of incarceration and back into society. And my understanding, we're getting close to the end of that pilot project, and it was very successful. We'll get data back on that in the not too distant future. Other cities have been working with different goals for MGI, but that was ours. And my understanding is that it's been very successful. And of course it is. If somebody comes out of jail and doesn't have any money or any resources, bad things are going to happen. They don't have opportunity to. That's soapbox, sorry. And I also want to remind everyone that one of the most important and often overlooked groups of victims of gun violence are suicides. The data around gun suicide is absolutely heartbreaking, and it is one of the most common kinds of gun violence. If you have a gun in your home, somebody in your home is far more likely to be injured or killed with a gun. That's just what the numbers tell us. Okay, Commissioner Book, sorry.
So to the Mayor Pro Tem, Santa Fe College has many students just like the one you described, and it is a game changer, and that's a fact. And it's partially because, and I hope the boss doesn't hear this, because Dr. Brody is a game changer. He's visionary, and he kind of infuses that just like the previous president across the institution.
Anyone else on this? All right, any other member comment? We are adjourned. Thank you.